We've got a couple people that are still not here, but I'll call the meeting to order. And we'll start off with the director, and he can do some introducing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you all know who I am by now. Jason Mead with Wyoming Water Development Office. We also have Jennifer Zigment with the Department of Environmental Quality, Sean King with the Office of State Lands and Investments, Christine Emminger with the Grants Management Office, and I believe everybody knows Representative Lloyd Larson. So first topic today is water and wastewater infrastructure. And before I get started, I kind of want to make sure we're all on the same page on what we're talking about here. It's fairly simple, but I thought it was worthwhile. So when we're talking about water or drinking water, we're talking about everything from the source, whether that be a well or a surface water diversion, to water treatment, to water storage tanks, down through transmission lines, which would take water to from your storage, your well, to different parts of town. And then you have your distribution systems, which takes your water out to the neighborhoods and your actual users. As part of that water treatment, that ranges from anything from really no treatment, if you have really good well water, to chlorination, filtration, to very advanced water treatment plants. And then on the wastewater side of things, we're talking about gray water, black water, water that goes down your sink and toilets, and how you treat that and put it back into the water bodies where it was received. And again, that ranges anywhere from individual septic tanks to lagoons to, again, pretty complicated wastewater treatment plants. So just so we know what we're talking about here, I wanted to start with that. Really, our intent here is for our three agencies to help inform you of what we do as agencies, the roles we have, the different funding sources and mechanisms we have to help water users that deal with these two water sources and resources, and then the challenges that we feel like everybody's facing throughout the state, our communities, some initiatives that are underway, and then some opportunities for assessment. And when I say that, asset management plans, which you're going to learn a lot about that today, and possible next steps. And then we've got a contractor that's working for DEQ that's got a pilot program that's going to show you an example of an asset management plan that they're working on. And then last is really, I wanted to mention Representative Larson being here. Shortly after the session, there was a bill last year, the Transportation Committee heard it, and it was in regards to funding for water systems. So I know there was a separate effort. He reached out to our three agencies near the end of the session. We've had conversations since then. So we wanted to really try to pull those two efforts together from the Transportation Committee, and Lloyd, or Representative Larson, leading the charge on that and the interim topic today. So he'll have a lot to add to this conversation. And then I'm sure there's folks from organizations that deal with this topic as well, such as Wyoming Association of Municipalities and Rural Water, that'll have representatives that may want to provide some comments. So I wanted to start with that. Next slide, please. So we'll start off with the roles of our different agencies. And so I'll start with Water Development Office since I'm talking. We are a sponsor-driven program, which means we don't go out and knock on people's doors and ask them to, hey, do you need a new water tank or a new transmission line? We, require them to come ask us when they see things happening. So that usually takes the form of either planning studies initially into construction projects. And we deal with anything from drinking water, but we also deal with agricultural and irrigation water too. So one thing I wanted to mention is the things that our program does fund, and getting back to kind of the definition, that's the source water, so wells, diversions, the storage of that water and management of that water, transmission projects, but we do not get into the distribution lines into the individual neighborhoods. And water treatment is something that we also do not fund. I would say when we do master plans and we're looking at, where are the bottlenecks? What does the future growth look like for a community? What are they going to need to plan for to be able to meet the demands of that growth? We do look at water treatment plants as part of those level 1 studies, just so we have a full understanding of their system. We do hydraulic models and understand, do they need upgrades? But when it actually gets to construction dollars for water treatment plants, we do not fund that. And a lot of that just has to do with the demand and the amount of money we have and the potential other opportunities out there where they might be able to get funding. And then we don't fund wastewater projects either. That's another spot where we feel like there's other funding sources out there and there are limitations with our program. And then in addition to what you guys normally see us doing, we also are kind of the technical arm of the Drinking Water SRF State Revolving Fund program. So when projects come in, some of our engineers will review those applications and designs for the technical nature. And then when the projects are actually being constructed, as far as reimbursement of funds, we handle some of that stuff. And then the Mineral Resource Grant Program through state lands, we also are a technical reviewer of those applications. So with that, I'll hand it over to state lands to talk about their roles.
So where does state lands involved with this? Well, the Office of State Lands and Investments, as you know, does a whole lot of variety of things, but within that office, there's a small little pocket that does grants and loans. There's a section that takes care of state-run programs like the Mineral Royalty Grant Program and the Capital Construction Loan Program. Both of those programs have the ability to fund water and wastewater projects, but they're not dedicated to those purposes. Then there's a section in the office that is the State Revolving Loan Fund. That's the part that I manage the financial section of. Within those funds, as you know, we come to you once a year to get the Drinking Water SRF IUP approved. And that sets up our fiscal year's plan on how we're going to utilize those funds. Now I'll hand it off to DQ.
Thanks, Sean. Again, Jennifer Zigmant. I'm the Water Quality Administrator for the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality. Our mission, simply put, is to protect the environment for the benefit of current and future generations. That's under the Wyoming Environmental Quality Act. And working with Wyoming's water and wastewater infrastructure is certainly a part of our mission. So to talk a little more about the programs we have related to infrastructure, I'm first going to start with the program we don't have, which is the Safe Drinking Water Act regulatory program. Wyoming has not obtained primacy for that program. So EPA Region 8 out of Denver currently implements that program in Wyoming, although we are here to help with technical assistance to our communities. But we do have other Safe Drinking Water Act programs. We implement the Capacity Development Program in Wyoming and Wyoming's Operator Certification Program. We do have primacy under the Clean Water Act to permit point source discharges, including things like wastewater treatment plants. And we work with particularly our small communities to make sure those treatment plants are complying with Clean Water Act and Wyoming standards. We issue permits to construct for these facilities to make sure they're designed appropriately to protect public health and the environment. And the DEQ is also a recipient of Clean Water SRF funds for several remediation programs, the storage tank program, landfill remediation, and remediation of orphan sites. And then finally, like water development, we're a technical assistance arm of the SRFs and MRGs. We help review those applications, again, make sure they meet environmental and engineering standards. And I think, next slide is mine, if we can go on. Okay, so next slide. The purpose of this slide is really just to emphasize that within our respective roles and authorities, each of our agencies is out working with our Wyoming communities to conduct education, outreach, and technical assistance activities related to infrastructure. It's an important part of what we do. And as you just heard, there's 3 agencies who are implementing the SRFs in Wyoming, and that's not uncommon. I would say it's fairly normal in other states also to have multiple agencies implementing the SRFs. But it does emphasize the need for coordination and collaboration. So we do work closely together, and we're always looking for ways to improve that coordination and collaboration. A few examples, recently we updated the MOU between our 3 agencies for the Drinking Water SRF program, and this just helps establish what authorities each agency has, what our roles and responsibilities are. At the director level and below, we meet quarterly to talk about SRF coordination issues. But the technical staff in each agency really are meeting at least monthly, if not weekly, to talk about ongoing projects, ongoing issues, and making sure that we're getting assistance to our communities. Finally, DEQ hosts what's called the Small Water and Wastewater Task Force. This is a quarterly meeting with the agencies and many partner organizations to, in particular, look at our small systems and direct technical assistance resources to those systems to resolve compliance or other issues. I would be very remiss if we didn't talk about the many partners we have in Wyoming for infrastructure. And again, EPA Region 8 is a partner since they implement the Safe Drinking Water Act regulatory program in Wyoming, and they provide oversight for the SRFs. We have the Grants Management Office here today. We work closely with Christine and others to help make sure our communities are aware of financial assistance opportunities. We work with many other state agencies, Department of Health, Department of Ag, and Homeland Security being three of the key ones. And then many organizations around the state, Association of Rural Water Systems, Midwest Assistance Program, the Association of Municipalities, County Commissioners Association, and then of course, the local staff and elected officials within our many communities. And I'll turn it back to Sean.
Okay, so within the state of Wyoming, where do the communities go to get financial assistance to get water and wastewater infrastructure projects done? Through the Office of State Lands and Investments, we have the Clean Water SRF program. Most of the communities come to it for wastewater infrastructure. We have the Drinking Water SRF program. People come to it for drinking water infrastructure. We'll go into a little more detail on those in a little bit. The other funding right now is through the IIJA bill. The IIJA bill that was instituted back in 2022 created new funding pots that run from 2022 through 2026 from the federal government. As you've probably seen in some press clippings from the EPA, there's hundreds of millions of dollars that these funds, this bill is going to be dropping on the state of Wyoming. But even though that the press clippings make it sound like it's just hundreds of millions is going to be dropped in for infrastructure, the majority of all those funds are flowing through the SRF program. So what they did on the drinking water side, they created a general supplemental allocation for every year. So we get roughly around 20 some odd million to $30 million extra than we normally get out of our base program. On the clean water side, they also have a general supplemental pot where we normally will get around $13 to $14 million through 2022 through 26 on top of our base program. Then on the drinking water side, that bill created a lead service line replacement and inventory grants that the state gets every year to help with those projects. And then the fourth pot on the drinking water side is it created an emerging contaminants pot of money that's specialized for any kind of projects that'll either test to identify or fund any type of infrastructure project that'll help remediate emerging contaminants in a community. There is also an emerging contaminants pot on the clean water side, but it's a very small amount and there's not a whole lot of areas in which those funds can be used at this point in time. Congress just basically created that pot to mirror the drinking water side. So that is what the IIJA bill basically, for the most part, the large amounts of money that you hear in the press is how it's coming through the state. It's coming through our SRF loan programs. Then within the Office of State Lands and Investments, we have the Mineral Royalty Grant Program. That's a program that's been around for, I believe it's around 20 some odd years. Every biennium, we get an appropriation. I've been in the Office of State Lands and in this funding atmosphere for almost 10 years. Normally a biennium, we get anywhere from $20 to $25 million to give away during the biennium. There's 4 actual meetings that those funds are given out on, and it's also available for people to come to get for emergency funding. Basically, that $25 million though, it's not dedicated to water and sewer. People can come to that program to get fire trucks, police cars, ambulances, any other type of infrastructure that needs that they have. So during a given meeting, the SLIB board would normally give out $4 to $5 million in a meeting, and it's to a whole array of different types of projects. So there's not a dedicated source of money through that program for water and wastewater infrastructure. The next thing that the Office of State Lands and Investments has that people can go to is the Capital Construction Loan Program. That in and of itself is a strictly loan program. There's roughly half of it, I believe, since the legislative changes, there's around $100 million available for communities to come to get road construction projects. And then another $100 million for communities to come to be able to get any other type of infrastructure funded through a loan. Those loans are normally around a 25-year maximum loan term, and the interest rate now is tied to the bond market. So right now, with the bond rates being higher, there's not a whole lot of pressure on that program at this time. The other area that people have,
Hold up, we got a question. Senator Boner?
Yeah. And you said the rates are tied to the bond rate. Is it more competitive than the general market? So you could go to your local bank. How's that?
basically, I believe it's tied to the 10 or 30 year. I think right now the interest rate that people are getting are around 4 to 5%. When the program was originally started, the rate was basically dependent upon your loan term, and it could range anywhere from, I believe, 1% to 2.5%. 2 years ago in the legislation, it was changed to basically go and be tied to the bond rate, just because of the fact that they did not think that it was a good thing to take money out of the corpus that fed that program in the big chunks when we could make more money through investments. And that's why the change in interest rates.
Follow up?
Okay, so just make sure I understand. It's tied to 20 or 30-year note and no additional premium add-on. It's exactly right wherever that rate is.
Yeah, it's wherever that rate is at the time. And unfortunately, I've never really worked that program. I've always been in the state revolving loan fund. So I'm not an expert on that one, but at this point in time, I believe we're sitting there giving around 4.5% to 5% interest rates, I believe, on those loans. The next opportunity for communities in the state to come and get funding for water and wastewater infrastructure is the USDA program. And the USDA program is basically really runs a lot like the SRF program. It's a federally funded program, completely federally funded. They deal with the feds on that program. And truly it's a loan program that has, like the SRF program, some type of grant kicker in there if you qualify. And at that point, I'll give it over to Jason.
So you're all aware the water development program's funded through mineral severance taxes. 3 accounts. Account 1 is our new development account. So that's, again, a lot of times new storage tanks, transmission lines, things of that nature. We can fund some agricultural type projects. Account 2 is our rehabilitation account. The rehab of those same types of projects, plus a lot of our irrigation projects fall into the rehab, putting ditch into pipe, diversion structures, things of that nature. Account 3 is our dam and reservoir account. Typically, we're building reservoirs for ag, but not saying it couldn't be used for municipal water supply as well. The mineral severance tax, so regardless if it's the percentages we get for each of our accounts are set in statute, and it is up to a maximum amount capped at 155 million. And when I say that, if there's 155 million of mineral severance taxes that come in, account 2 or account 1 gets 12.45% of that, which equates to roughly $19.3 million. If we get $500 million worth of mineral severance taxes, we still only get the 19 million because our percentage is capped based on the 155, a percentage of 155, if that makes sense. So essentially our funding has been stagnant since really the 80s for the most part. It hasn't changed. And then I might also say really what we're talking about today is account 1 and account 2 for municipal infrastructure. When we think about return on investments, because those account balances are invested through the treasurer's office, we're looking at roughly $29 million a year between account 1 and account 2. And if you recall on Tuesday, we talked about non-project costs. So one of those would be our budget for our office employees. One would be the Board of Control budget, which equates to quite a bit of money. Another one would be we cover 10% of the capitalization grant through the EPA as part of that, and that equates to $1 million or more every year. So by the time you take away all those non-project, you're looking at really about $13.5 million left over for projects between account 1 and account 2. All right, next slide.
So now we're going to talk about some of the main funding sources from OSLI just for water and sewer. On the water side, we have the Drinking Water SRF Fund. The Drinking Water SRF Fund was born out of the Safe Drinking Water Act approximately 27 years ago. What it did is it created a federal grant program at the federal level that every state in the union plus the territories get a capitalization grant every year from the federal government to seed hopefully a revolving loan fund. The state's commitment is it has to have a 20% match. What can the Drinking Water SRF Fund fund? Basically on the drinking water side, anything. We can do source water treatment, distribution, storage tanks, and basically that's it. Water treatment plants. We can fund anything on the drinking water side. The Clean Water SRF program, it was born out of the Clean Water Act, and it's been around for about 37 years. So the state's been getting a capitalization grant with the same conditions with a 20% match for 37 years. The Clean Water SRF program can fund a multitude of things. The majority of our funding for our communities is for their wastewater systems. But the Clean Water Act also has a whole lot of different things as far as what this funding can be used for. So we can do sanitary sewers, wastewater treatment plants, we can do stormwater control. We help fund the leaking underground storage tank program through a loan to DEQ to help make those funds go longer. And originally to get people and usage of the Clean Water SRF program, it really took care of all the federal requirements to safeguard our municipalities from having to deal with those. We can do other water pollution, anything like under the 319 best management practices that have been adopted by DEQ, we can actually fund projects that revolve around those. In the state of Wyoming, we don't fund a whole lot of those. We have done a few projects here and there. We do a lot as far as non-point source. We do a lot of landfill remediation projects as far as non-point source. We helped do the GID emergency funding for their irrigation district. That was we can do irrigation projects through the Clean Water Act and the SRF funds, but it gets a whole lot pickier as far as when it goes down that route. But as far as within our state, our communities normally use it for wastewater treatment or wastewater collection systems. The one thing I really want to point out in the presentation with Clean Water SRF is that it is the only state program that's dedicated to the wastewater sector in the state of Wyoming. There's no other real funding that's dedicated just towards it. So if you like,
I have a question.
what that's mean. So with the SRF,
Hang
Oh,
on a
sorry.
second. Senator Anselmi.
Thank you, Chairman Eklund.
Oh,
That's
that's.
all right, your
Commissioner.
name's good. I go by all.
Once was.
Chairwoman, you name it. So I just don't know, maybe others do, but how much money is in the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, and how is it funded, and how much is in the Clean Water one? And how do you allocate that money out? I just want to understand it.
So right now, as far as at the end of the year, the Drinking Water SRF Fund has approximately $237,842,000 in it. Basically how it's funded is through the capitalization grants from the feds and the 20% match. The 20% match for the Drinking Water SRF program, 10% comes out of the mineral royalty grant budget and 10% comes from the water development budget. On the Clean Water SRF side, at the end of the year, we had approximately $206,309,000. I'm giving you approximate numbers because that was at the end of the year and we've had a few transactions so far this year. It's the same thing. It's fed by the federal capitalization grants plus a 20% match that comes from the corrective action account from DEQ. And that's how our funding comes in every year. How those funds are distributed every year, like we talked about, you guys go ahead and approve an intended use plan for the drinking water. So basically, for the last 2 years, in December, we open up our project solicitation period. And what we've done is we've come up with a need survey. Anybody who wants to have a project put onto our intended use plan for the next fiscal year will fill out a need survey. Basically, what we do is we go through that. They have to put in documentation to prove that they're going to earn some of the points as far as regulatory. We go through, we finalize all the points for each project that's submitted. And then we rank and file them by that point system. Through both programs, through the capitalization grants that we get, there's a certain amount, and it depends upon the program. On the drinking water side, we normally can give around 40 to 45% of it away in principal forgiveness. On the clean water side, the grants are smaller. We normally can give up to around 35% of that in principal forgiveness. So within our intended use plan, we take the top ranked communities. Within each program for that principal forgiveness, the federal government really has those funds geared to go in towards small disadvantaged communities or affordable communities that are small and have affordability problems. It's basically the same dynamics, just worded differently between the two acts. Basically, through that ranking system, we try and put together the best funding packages that we can give to the top so many communities, depends upon how much money we have at the time and the principal forgiveness. We then take those top few, we email them and we ask them, are you going to actually utilize this funding package that we will have reserved for you during the next state fiscal year? If you apply and get your loan approved at normally 3 special SLID board meetings. If they commit to that funding, we will reserve that funding package for them until they come in and we can get it approved by the SLID board. Anybody who does not come in for that reserve funding package, that principal forgiveness package, then we will open up basically in December and put out an announcement and let everybody know this is how much principal forgiveness that we have available. And people who do not make what we call our project priority list that have a reserved funding package form are then open that qualify for that principal forgiveness to try and get that leftover principal forgiveness. So that is basically how it's allocated out every year. We try and do it through projects that first have really regulatory problems. So if there's a drinking water system that the EPA has orders to perform, to do certain projects to correct the problems that they're having, they get higher point values, and we try and prioritize those type of projects first, foremost. And our principal forgiveness, we prioritize to our small and disadvantaged communities, which in the state of Wyoming is the majority. That is one federal requirement of the system, of the programs, that we never have to worry about. You're supposed to give at least 15% of your federal grant to small and disadvantaged communities. We never even have to track that because it's a given for us. But that's the overall funding mechanisms and how we decide to disperse those funds every year.
Quick follow-up. Thank you. Is there a maximum amount that you can grant out? And do you get basically about $200 million every year from the federal government?
No, those numbers that I gave you, those are our numbers that are in the pot right now from inception to date, plus some of the federal grants that we have. So that's dollars that has been recycled throughout the years from loan repayments, interest repayments, and investment income from money that's in the bank and in investment accounts.
Are there max amounts of the grants then? I mean, is there?
Basically,
we have max amounts.
as far as the loans, as far as the principal forgiveness amount, if you're talking about that, within our rules, people can qualify anywhere from 25, 50, and 75%. Over the last few years, with the pressure on the program, even with the extra money, we have not been able to give people those amounts. As far as like this year on the drinking water side, the highest principal forgiveness awards anybody got was 49%. On the clean water side, it was basically 67% was the highest awards.
And Sean, maybe before you continue, I'll interrupt for just a second, because that's one thing I failed to discuss was Our program for the longest time since I started working here was 67% grants or up to 67% grants. Because of the demand here just in the last 2 years, we've reduced those to 50% max grants. And then on loans, if they're eligible for drinking water SRF, which most municipal type projects are, we push them towards state lands drinking water SRF because they have better interest rates anyway, and it takes advantage of that EPA funding. On the irrigation side, then we would potentially provide loans to them if they don't have matching fund through federal programs. So just a little piece of information there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Anselmi. For us lay people around these SRF programs, there's maybe a little additional information I can help you with. So the intent of the SRF loan program is that the federal government was going to infuse this money, and then it would be a source of revenue in perpetuity. So they loan it out, you get it paid back, comes back in, you continue to loan it. Then we talk about this principal forgiveness. So then what happens, you diminish the pot that's then available. And so they've continued to add funds in there. We've grown, and one of the reasons Wyoming has grown since my time in the legislature is communities have resisted using the SRF because for the longest period of time, it was a loan requirement and the interest rate on the loans was really difficult. That changed in a few years ago to come down and is more palatable to the municipalities. But as you're well aware, most municipalities are really limited on their capacity to take on that time of debt, both constitutionally and just fiscally. And so that principal forgiveness or other sources is really important. But that's the intent is to be revolving. And if that clarifies anything.
Thanks, Representative.
As I say, just to maybe
Wait,
to
hold
prove
on a
that
second.
point,
Senator Bonner?
Well, however, and just as you answer that question, just maybe a broad overview of how much money is available versus the demand. Are you having to turn people away? If so, what is the constraint there? Is it the federal funds? Is it state funds? Just a little bit more information about that.
I was going to say, since I've been in the program, we've really never had to turn anybody away at this point because so as far as like the drinking water side, we have $237 million. Of that, our cash balance from revolving funds of loan repayments and then whatnot is $190 million. The other portion of that 237 are open capitalization grants that we have that all those funds are pretty much allocated out into projects. We just have to get the projects done and those dollars spent. So that's kind of where, kind of tells you where we are at with that as far as with the revolving fund. We do have very healthy revolving loan funds. Unfortunately for the state of Wyoming, the SRF programs on the national level are a cookie cutter kind of a program. So that it really works against us because they like to have us have all those dollars out at all times. And that basically every year, all we would be doing is lending out our capitalization grants plus our projected payments for the year. But with the size of Wyoming, we would never be able to achieve that. We just wouldn't have the capacity to lend all that money out, nor probably run that many construction projects in the state at that same time. But we do have a very healthy loan fund. One of the things that deters people from coming to the SRF program to get loans are the federal requirements. Because since it is a federally funded program, there are strings attached. So with a SRF loan, any program that's using the federal funds and what we call an equivalency project. So if we take $10 million in grants, we have to have $10 million that we can report to the feds in loans that are going to meet every single federal requirement. So that means Build America, Buy America certification for every piece of product that goes into a construction project, Davis-Bacon wage rates, and those are really the real big ones. The other items with some of our small communities, the environmental review process is normally kind of harmless It's just the majority of our small communities don't have the staff to do that kind of work on their own. So they have to have an engineering firm do that. And as we all know, engineering firms charge money. So it costs them to do that portion of the application process. But those are the biggest deterrents to the loan program, is just the federal requirements. It's not that we don't have the funding. Basically with our small communities, so if we have a $10 million grant on the drinking water side, they allow us to give 40%. We'll have $4 million to give away in principal forgiveness. Once those dollars are gone, most communities will stray away from the loan program because there's not a grant component in there. One of the things that we did to try and curb that was 2 years ago, we changed when all these federal funds were being put out into the system, as far as from the IIJ bill, ARPA, is we lowered our interest rates. Our interest rates now, the maximum interest rate that anybody will receive is a 1.5% interest rate. You will only get that interest rate is if you're a community that is lucky and gets a full principal forgiveness award. What we did to keep everybody competitive and try and make these loans as low cost as possible, since we knew that we weren't going to really be able to give out full principal forgiveness awards anymore, we lowered the interest rate for partial principal forgiveness awards. So now communities that get a partial principal forgiveness award also get an interest rate that ranges from 0.5% to 1% on their note. Our loan terms are a maximum of 30 years. The loan term on any loan cannot exceed the useful life of the project. So basically, through our lead service line we are doing a lot of vac trucks for communities right now so that they can finish up their inventories. Since a vac truck has a useful life depending upon usage and maintenance of anywhere from 7 to 15 years, your loan term basically is going to be based on what your usage rate's going to be. But normally, most of our loans are going out from anywhere from 20 to 30-year loan terms. Some other things that we have done in the program to incentivize people is we have large loan interest rates. So a lot of these infrastructure projects are very pricey. It doesn't matter whether you're a small community or a large community, you can run into very high project dollars. So we have, for large loans, anywhere from a 0.25% interest rate to a 0.75% interest rate. We also instituted a 0% interest rate for any community that volunteered to be one of those equivalency projects. So if a community wants to be a partner with the state's SRF program and they volunteer and say, we will take on every federal requirement, we will give you a 0% interest rate for your loan. Just because you're partnering with us to be able to, the state, meet all of its federal requirements and continue to have access to these loan funds from the federal government. We do have some specialized interest rates for 0% interest for any green components of a loan. And then for larger communities that don't qualify for principal forgiveness, like Cheyenne, Casper, Gillette, and Sheridan and whatnot, Rock Springs, Green River, their maximum interest rate is always going to be 0.25% if they don't take advantage of one of our other different lower interest rates with the large loan program. So that's where the funding comes from for the SRF programs, and then some of the incentives for communities to come to the SRF program to get a loan. Let's be the next slide. And Jason, or is it Jennifer?
I think I'm up. So Mr. Chairman, we're now on page 8 of the presentation. The purpose of this slide is really just to give you an overview, a very high level overview of what systems we have in Wyoming for drinking water and wastewater. For public water systems, which are defined as a system that serves drinking water to 25 or more people for the better part of a year or has 15 or more service connections, Wyoming has a total of 780 of those types of systems. Those are broken down into subcategories. First would be a community water system, and this is a public water system that serves drinking water to the same population year-round. We have 322 of those. Those would, of course, include our communities, also other water and sewer districts that serve our citizens. And we also have what are called non-community water systems. And those are systems that serve drinking water to the same population for at least 6 months out of the year. We have 90 non-community water systems. These are our hospitals, schools, churches, or industrial facilities that have their own water system rather than the municipal water system. And then the final category, transient non-community water systems, simply means these are public water systems that serve drinking water to a changing population over the course of a year. So campgrounds, motels, hotels, dude ranches, again, that have their own public water system rather than using a municipal water system. Most of our drinking water systems in the state get their drinking water from groundwater, 84%. So we are a state that is largely dependent on groundwater for drinking water. Only 16% receive water from a surface water source. You've already heard this. You're going to hear it again throughout this presentation. And I know this is not news to anybody on the committee, but Wyoming is mostly small communities. 83% of our public water systems serve populations of less than 500 people. Only 1% or 9 systems serve populations greater than 10,000. Again, not news to anybody, but it really is important to keep in mind that Wyoming is predominantly small systems. This is a trend true in other Western states, but I think even more so in Wyoming. So as Sean said, when we have national programs that can be a bit of a cookie cutter program, they may not always fit the model that works well for Wyoming. So it's important for us to weigh in on these programs nationally to make sure we have solutions that work for small rural communities. Briefly on the wastewater treatment side of things, we have 96 publicly owned wastewater treatment facilities that discharge, meaning they treat that sewage, they treat the effluent before safely discharging it to a river, stream, or lake. Most of these are fairly simple lagoon systems. We do have a few mechanical treatment plants in the state that are more complex, maybe about 15 or so of those. And then our other communities use some kind of non-discharging facility, usually a lagoon system, but maybe some kind of septic system too. Okay, turn it over to Jason.
Okay, so now we're going to start talking about some of the challenges that we've seen throughout the state. I think it's pretty obvious that our smaller communities are the ones that are facing those challenges. And a lot of times what that consists of is really what they're charging for water rates and really the reverse of that and the inflation we've seen over the years and the cost to actually replace infrastructure just aren't matching up. So there's a budget shortfall. And then on a national scale, American Society of Civil Engineers put out a report not too long ago that talked about aging and failing infrastructure is a priority concern. So we're not alone. They put a number in that report that across the nation over the next 20 years, there's a need for $625 billion to replace infrastructure. They also mentioned asset management plans, which we're going to be getting to here in a minute. And I think it was less than a third of the states had asset management plans. So we're not alone there either. It's a challenge the entire nation's facing. In Wyoming, we're fortunate that we have had good programs through the Water Development Office, Drinking Water SRF, and et cetera, but it ranges from new infrastructure to infrastructure that has failed in emergency situations. There's communities, and a lot of that has to do with turnover, which we're going to be talking about here in a few minutes as well. So we have seen the demand pick up through both SRF programs as well as the water development program. So I think that's going to continue into the future, and which is why we're talking about it today. How do we get a handle on that? So with that, I think I pass it back to Sean for the next slide.
So infrastructure funding challenges that we see within the SRF program. So if a community comes to the SRF program for our normal pots of money, you're going to leave the program with a loan. You are going to repay something. Within the SRF program, you have to have a dedicated repayment source. And that dedicated repayment source, we do a financial analysis on, and it has to prove out that it covers all of your operational expenses for your enterprise system, all your debt, and your new debt. There's a statute on the books to where on the water side, you were supposed to have your utility rate set to cover your operational expenses, debt plus depreciation. The majority of our systems do not meet that. The depreciation part of it does not get covered through most utility rates. When we do a financial analysis, we don't necessarily make them cover that. Within the SRF program, they have to meet a 1.20 debt ratio. So we make sure that they can cover all their operational expenses, existing debt, the new debt, plus they're going to be able to put a little bit of money away for future emergencies or to plan for future projects. Some of the problems that our municipalities face with utility rates, just the community pressure. Nobody wants to raise rates because nobody wants to pay more. People don't see the value in having water and sewer. They just kind of come to expect that it should be offered and be available. They don't think of it as, it's basically you're going to the grocery store and you're buying that as a commodity good. Then really the lack of knowledge for a lot of the communities, small communities, they don't know how to normally put together a utility rate, or they don't have the funding to be able to hire services to do that for them, because there are services out there. The next thing that is a big problem for us is just demographics. Basically, the current US Census data, the Wyoming's population is made up of 19.7% of people 65 and over, 22.2% of people under 18. So that results in 41.9% of our population on fixed incomes, lower incomes, or don't have an income to feed into a utility rate at all. The other thing that there's really no place that I've ever been able to find data on in Wyoming, we really don't know how many people have private water and septic systems. Those are other people that are off the table to help municipalities pay for infrastructure. What that leads to, as far as with our communities being so small, there's no economies of scale. 83% of the public water systems in Wyoming are less than 500. A lot of them are around the 200 population range. Basically, what this has all led to is not having your rates historically from way in the past when you put in the infrastructure covering all your depreciation, is there's a large deficit. And at this day and age, unfortunately, with the landscape of infrastructure projects, prior to COVID hitting, $1 million project then now normally is costing anywhere from $2 to $3 million, as I think you guys have seen during the omnibus bill. You guys land up approving projects at X amount, and the next year that project, when it goes out to bid, they're coming back for more money. We see the same thing through the SRF program. We loan out dollars. Once they go out to bid, they're coming back for a few $100,000 to a few $1 million more. And it's unfortunately the majority of projects. Engineers right now, I think, are just now getting into the landscape of what the charges are for these type of projects. And they're starting to come in a little more true as far as what we've seen in the SRF program. I would say another thing is elected officials, they just don't have the capability and the resources to understand they are the owners of those water and wastewater systems. Basically, at the last WHAM convention, we participated in a little talk with the EPA. The mayor of Alvin brought up to the EPA, why do you send me my sanitary survey? I was like, I have nothing to do with running my water system. And he's like, no, you're the mayor. You own your water system. Your operator, he's your employee. Because he was like, you should send it to my operator. He takes care of it. And he's like, no, he's your employee. You're the owner. You need to know what your deficit is on your water system and the problems with your water system. It was one of the truest statements I've ever heard in any presentation with water. Another thing with small municipalities is, they normally they don't have full-time staffs. A lot of the times to come up with funding for these type of projects, it's basically given to the clerk treasurer. That clerk treasurer may work 20 hours a week, if that. Those clerk treasurers oftentimes aren't educated in what governmental accounting is. WHAM trains them, and as soon as WHAM gets them trained up, they get out of it and you're starting all over. A lot of our small communities staffing is very much cyclical. There's there's turnover over and over and over again. So they just don't have the people in their communities to be able to take on the funding and figure out how to fund infrastructure projects. One of the things people always come to us and they're like, how do the small communities, like the town of Upton, we use as a poster child. Mark Lindstrom up in Upton 20 years ago had a plan and he's been doing that plan forever. Once he gets one part done, he comes up with a new plan. We tell everybody, you need one person in your community to care. Until that one person decides to care and learns the programs, you're always going to be in this cycle. And unfortunately, a lot of our communities don't have that one person. So those are the infrastructure funding challenges to our communities.
All right, with the next slide, I'll just wrap up a few additional challenges that we wanted the committee to be aware of. We're very often asked about, do we have a statewide inventory or some kind of statewide database with all of our infrastructure? And the short answer is no, we don't. So it is a problem that we lack that comprehensive picture of what we have in Wyoming and what condition it's in. Not only are communities dealing with getting, safe drinking water to their residents and safely treating sewage on a day-to-day basis, but there's always new issues coming down the pike at them. For example, there's initiative at the federal level to get the lead out. This is an important initiative. People should not be drinking lead, particularly children. So it's a good initiative, but it's additional workloads, it's additional financial resources on our communities that are already struggling with day-to-day services. Same with emerging contaminants. You've heard Sean talk about some targeted IIJA funds for emerging contaminants. These are things like PFAS, per and polyfluoral alkyl substances, the forever chemicals you might be hearing about in the news. Again, another important public health initiative that we need to address, but we just don't have the resources to tackle it head on right now. We have an incredible operator workforce in Wyoming, our certified operators, of which we have about 1,200 operators within Wyoming who are certified to run our drinking water and wastewater plants. These are tough jobs. They're often unsung heroes that keep these plants going on a daily basis. Again, it's not hard for that workforce to get overloaded with these requirements, particularly hard for our small communities to hire and retain those people. And as many of those operators reach retirement, we're going to see a reduction in that workforce. So we need to find new ways to bring people into that career field. In general, you're hearing that just at the local level, there's insufficient resources to plan projects and access funding. We've got many parts of the state that are seeing rapid growth or have some very exciting economic development opportunities coming their way, and it can be challenging for them to build the infrastructure that they need as quickly as they need it. Again, we've got many communities either with Clean Water Act or Safe Drinking Water Act compliance concerns. And you already heard about contractor availability, material availability, and increasing cost due to inflation. So next slide. So what are we doing to start addressing some of these challenges? We do want to convey to the committee that we are working with the resources that we have to start tackling these challenges. So a lot of work is underway, but there's a lot more work to be done. But just to quickly talk to you about what work we are doing as a team of agencies and our partner agencies and organizations. First, we have an asset management planning project with 6 Wyoming communities, and I'll talk about that more here in the next couple slides. We've got a contractor helping our communities with lead line inventorying and removal to meet federal requirements and get the lead out. We've got a contractor updating our source water protection area delineation so that we have accurate information about where drinking water is coming from. We're lining up a contractor to help communities plan for emergency events, whether those are man-made or natural. We routinely have technical assistance contracts, for example, with WARS or MAPS to provide assistance to our communities and most recently our transient systems. We're always working, as is the Grants Management Office, to connect municipalities to financial opportunities as well as technical assistance opportunities. I'm sure everyone here is aware that under the Water Development Commission, there's numerous sponsor-driven planning and construction projects underway. DEQ is standing up an emerging contaminants program to start tackling PFAS and other chemicals that are emerging threats. You heard about some of the SRF changes that we've made recently to better incentivize the program, ensure that we've got broad eligibility so that the maximum number of communities can participate and benefit from those programs. And we always have an emphasis on leveraging the federal funding available to us to stretch our limited state dollars as far as they can go. So we always have that as one of our goals. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm really excited to talk to you more about asset management planning. We think this is a really important step to further addressing the challenges that our communities are seeing, making sure that our citizens have safe drinking water and that our sewage is being treated appropriately before being discharged or otherwise disposed of. Asset management planning is part of DEQ's capacity development program. Capacity development, simply put, is making sure that a system has the technical, managerial, and financial tools that it needs to run the system in the long term. Asset management plans are part of that. It's simply the simple way to put it is what assets do you have, what do you have, and what condition is it in? So pretty basic questions, but pretty important questions to answer. More specifically, they develop an inventory and assess the conditions of the assets. They identify the critical assets, develop operation and maintenance plans, and related to what Sean just walked through in detail, help our communities develop sustainable financial plans, both rates and feasible projects. So we're very excited to enter into a contract with a company called Cayuga Solution to do a pilot project for 6 Wyoming community drinking water systems. Those communities are the town of Afton, town of Burns, town of Chugwater, city of Sheridan, city of Rollins, and the Aspen Pines Water and Sewer District in Teton County. And we intentionally chose a variety of systems, systems that serve small populations, those that serve large populations, those with a little bit of data, those with a lot of data, to really get an estimate of what it's going to take, both in terms of time and money, to develop these for all of our drinking water systems. Because that is our next goal and our key recommendation that we have in these infrastructure discussions, which is to help all Wyoming communities develop asset management plans for both drinking water and wastewater. We are already underway working toward that goal, particularly with drinking water, where we have funds through the Drinking Water SRF where we can tackle that. Where we lack funds really is on the clean water side of things to address wastewater needs. As Sean mentioned, the funding for the wastewater side of things is much more limited. But again, we think asset management planning is a critical first step. We can't make informed decisions unless we know what we have. Saying that you can't manage what you can't measure, I think, is absolutely true here. Cayuga Solution is here today to talk to the committee to give you more sense of what their asset management planning tool looks like. So I'll keep my remarks brief. But on the next slide, I'll just run through a few of the benefits that we see asset management planning having for the state and tie it back to addressing the challenges that we just walked through with the committee. Again, first and foremost for me, this will get us what we need in order to have a comprehensive assessment and a database system where we can see what we have in Wyoming and know what condition it's in. It's that roadmap that we need from where is Wyoming now, where do we need to go, and how are we going to get there? It will give us a sense of where our critical assets are, meaning what, if we had to choose, what are the top priorities that we need to fix in order to protect public health and the environment. Again, evaluate financial plans, set sustainable rates. Very important that this is going to be, I think, a very valuable tool to give clear information to educate boards, local decision makers, and the public. Sean explained, and I absolutely agree, that the mayor, other local elected officials likely are doing 2 to 3 jobs. They have limited resources, they have limited staff, they don't have a lot of money, and they have to make tough decisions, and we understand that. And this will help make sure that that community has the continuity of knowledge as those staff change. So rather than that knowledge being lost when the public works director retires, this will be a good tool to make sure that whoever steps into those decision-making roles has access to current information, geospatial information, to know what they have and know what needs they have versus what wants they have. And similarly with the public, as Sean mentioned, it's not always clear to people what it takes to get water from a source to your tap. There's a lot of steps involved, and it's important for people to understand that. We think this will help resolve some of the Clean Water Act compliance issues we deal with, the Safe Drinking Water Act compliance issues with EPA. It'll help us better understand who we need to help and when. As a state, I think it will give us the information we need to look at how much money do we need, how much do we have available, and do we need to consider other funding sources? Lastly, there's many parts and pieces of infrastructure. There's many players, and having this information together will help support the partnerships, collaboration, and alignment of goals that we need between not just the agencies here, other agencies, and our partner organizations and local communities. This really isn't a unique model. I think it's kind of a common sense approach. We do know this model has been used in other parts of the state, which is, we've got a problem, and the first step is to inventory it, assess it, get some more information and data, and then set some kind of priority or direction or strategic plan. So we're excited to be underway with this. We are looking forward to broadening this across Wyoming. But there's a lot more work to do. And with that, I will turn it over to Representative Larson to talk about next steps and where we may want to go from here.
Let's do Christine.
Oh, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Christine Eminger, Administrator for the Grants Management Office within the State Budget Department. I would just like to hand it over to Drew Palmer, who is online today for some opening remarks, and then I would like to step forward into why we're here today and the value we provide to these agencies that are preparing and presenting this plan to you today.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Drew Palmer, and I'm Governor Gordon's Grants Integration Manager. The Grants Management Office is housed in the State Budget Department, where I work closely with Director Kevin Hibbert, Christine Eminger, who is our Grants Administrator and Senior Budget Analyst, along with Diana Cabriales, who is the Deputy Grants Administrator and the Senior Advisor. So I want to give you a little history about who we are, how we can provide some assistance, and maybe how we got here. This idea really started around 2016 and 2017 when the legislature commissioned a study with consultants Alvarez and Marcel, which is referred to as the efficiency study. The bottom line is we determined that Wyoming ranked very low in receiving federal funds, yet we pay significantly into the federal treasury. What Chief of Staff Drew Perkins wanted me to relay is that when they looked at this, and when we compared its comparables to comparable states like Idaho and South Dakota in seeking and obtaining federal grants, there was an important finding since the state's general fund and school foundation program were continually looked at as a source of funding for state, sub-regional, and local needs. In contrast, Wyoming's comparator states and their sub-regional and local governments were much more successful at fulfilling local needs through federal and charitable grants. In many cases, grant dollars obtained provide relief and less demand on general fund of state and local governments while addressing local needs and aspirations. So this concept really started to take off once the pandemic hit, and then we received CARES Act funding, ARPA funding, and then, of course, Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act funding. So due to all of these reasons, Governor Gordon had the vision to launch the Grants Management Initiative. We stood this office up and went live last July 8th of 2024. It is a first of its kind, one of a kind in the nation, and it stands as a visionary model for grant management and capacity building specifically. The office was put in place to be a resource to assist state agencies, local governments, tribal governments and organizations, nonprofits, and small businesses to build capacity over time and provide additional resources to apply for federal and state grants. It is the expectation that our effort will assist in laying the foundation for a viable solution in meeting the technical assistance and resource needs of our communities long term. The overarching goal is to create a one-stop shop for resources related to federal and state grant opportunities and working to identify stacking and braiding options, or including IRA or other tax credits or direct pay opportunities to maximize benefits to state and local communities. Through the State Budget Department, we hired a third-party contractor, Haggerty Consulting, to assist us with the following services. We established the Wyoming Grant Assistance Program, or YGAP, to assist us, and Christine will talk a little bit more about those services and some of our successes thus far. They also assist us with coordination and technical assistance requests that we receive from all of those entities that we serve. We provide researching opportunities, which is really important when you look at grants.gov and you're looking at federal funding opportunities across the board. It's so overwhelming, you stop before you ever get to what it is you're finding. So we needed some assistance with that piece as well. We can also help with writing your grant, reviewing your grant, and with the full grant life cycle of monitoring, reporting, and auditing. We also provide training and support services. The one thing that we will not do, we will not tell you what to apply for. That is your responsibility to determine what grants you want to apply for, what eligibility and strings attached you want to approve. But the services that we provide are all free of charge. So the Grants Management Office really wants to continue to actively find ways to be valuable, provide resources and capacity, and we're really here to just provide support services for all of the things that the panelists talked about. So I'm going to turn it over to Christine to give you a little bit more detail about who we are and what we do.
Thank you very much, Drew, for your opening remarks. I don't want to be duplicative over what Drew said, so I'm going to skip through some slides. She talked about how the State Budget Department, Grants Management Office, and the Governor's Office work together to help support the Grants Management Initiative and the entities in Wyoming that we serve. So it is a whole array. It is very vast. Local governments, tribal governments, and organizations, our own state agencies. We even have a collective work group with some of our federal partners. Those from the EPA sometimes attend that bi-weekly meeting as well and give us a heads up about any of those upcoming funding opportunities that may be available to Wyoming communities when it comes to wastewater treatment or water sewer infrastructure. The term local governments, though, we use that as an all collective term. So this includes the conservation districts. This would include water sewer irrigation districts, special hospital districts. Baseline, essentially, if you are eligible to apply to a federal, state, or private foundational opportunity, and you are in Wyoming and you are servicing Wyoming citizens, the Grants Management Office is able to help you. Our office goals are very, very simple. You heard Drew speak about how we help local communities and Wyoming entities identify, pursue, and secure and manage grant funds. It is very important to understand the grants management life cycle. 20% is really just going out and trying to write and secure the grant. The real work comes in once you receive that money, because it's go time and you are on a tight schedule and you need to go out and you need to secure a contractor and you need to get that work done within the period of performance. So when Drew spoke about helping communities identify these other alternative funding opportunities, that is what we present them with. And if they choose to go forward through an alternative funding mechanism, we have the technical assistance services in place to help them throughout the entirety of the grants management lifecycle. From the time that they decide to pursue that opportunity, whether it's a state, a federal, or private foundation opportunity, all the way through the time that they would have to close out that grant and be audited by external auditors. We do not tell communities what to do. That's not our business. We are really here to just support them in their decisions to align funding opportunities with the communities, with the value of their communities and the priorities of their communities. It is all to build a lasting framework. So every time we get a technical assistance request and we have to create a new template or a new piece of information or help someone develop an internal control procedure, that gets built out into every other community, and it will help service every other community that may come to us with that technical assistance request. We want to develop the framework and the foundation so that whenever clerks and treasurers and public works directors do leave and they are on this cyclical time period, that the information and the knowledge that they had doesn't leave with them. And so when that new person steps into the role, they are able to successfully manage those state or federal dollars. It is important to manage those dollars with diligence, though, because if you do not, you look more risky to the state and you look more risky to the federal government, which in turn is not good for us because then we look like a more risky applicant when we try to go out and compete against other states for these eligible water sewer infrastructure dollars. Some of the services that we have to provide to offer underneath of our technical assistance program, YGAP, is project planning. You heard Sean and you heard Jennifer and you heard Director Mead talk about how these communities, they come in with an emergency project and we sometimes don't know the appropriate funding source in which to fund them. We see at the Grants Management Office that there is a lack of project planning in the community, whether that's towards the industry area of water sewer, transportation, rural healthcare, you name it. Water sewer infrastructure seems to be the biggest one where we see a lack of project planning, even though we have incredible resources from the Water Development Office, the DEQ, and the OSLI. When it comes to, oh, excuse me, I did not finish that slide. You also heard us talk about grant research. If someone presents us with a problem, say a water quality problem, we are able to go out and identify alternative funding opportunities or mechanisms to help remediate that issue within their community and provide them a funding mechanism. That grant research, though, gets overwhelming when we provide it to those individuals. And it's because they are only aware of the 3 or 4 programs that you heard about today. The program from the Water Development Office. You heard Director Mead say that they only have around $13 million. The program is oversubscribed because so many people know about it. You heard Sean King say, hey, he gave statistics about how many millions of dollars of applications they've received in the last 2 fiscal years. It's oversubscribed. The MRG program in June, they had about $9 million worth of applications come in. They only had $5.5 million to give out. And it's because the horizon and the landscape of federal funds and alternative funding mechanisms isn't easily identifiable for Wyoming communities. And that is where the grant research aspect of the Grants Management Office comes in. And we have provided a transparency tool to identify all Wyoming specific funding opportunities, and it is available on the State Budget Department website. Through all of that, we are still here to offer grant writing assistance and grant application development. We want to make sure our applications are eligible and they are competitive, especially at a national level. I'm sure that other states have great projects that they want to fund. Sorry, but we want Wyoming to be #1 and at the top of the list when it comes to project funding. Once we receive those dollars, it's go time. It's time to help communities prepare a plan to disperse those dollars. So reviewing policies, reviewing internal control procedures, enhancing those procedures, or even developing new procedures based on the federal guidance for that program in which they were allotted funding from. That is where the real risk comes in. You have to go out, you have to provide public notice that you are going to hire a contractor and for what services. It is very, very critical. The most important slide that I have to show today is actually has to do with the ARPA program. And if many of you are not familiar, it was about $1 billion that the state of Wyoming received from the United States Treasury. And there were several different funding categories, if you will. Water sewer infrastructure was one of them. It was considered presumptively eligible by the United States Treasury. And our legislature back in 2022, they decided to appropriate some of those funds towards different programs in Wyoming. One of them was the omnibus water bill. The legislature actually appropriated around $4.5 or $5 million, but one of the projects got canceled. So we funded that at the amount of $3 million back in 2022. Where it gets really interesting is when we funded water sewer infrastructure with the ARPA program under Senate File 66. Originally, the Senate file was developed and it appropriated $50 million just for the water sewer infrastructure program. Between July 1, 2022 and August 12th, of 2022, OSLI received more than $225 million of applications for a $50 million program. The legislature then appropriated $30 million more towards that program in 2023. Obviously, it's oversubscribed. Another area was the local government program under Senate File 66 with the ARPA dollars. It's really funny about that program. It was developed so that there was a footnote in there that said, hey, when you go to apply for this program under OSLI, we're going to deprioritize water sewer projects for local governments. The funny part, we only received 4 applications for non-water sewer related infrastructure. Only 4 applications. They totaled $1.9 million. Everything else was water sewer infrastructure applications. So even at the designation of the legislature that water sewer projects were deprioritized, that's all anybody applied for. And then whenever it came time to redeploy ARPA dollars from all of the unobligated things, so we didn't have to send back any money to the United States Treasury at the end of December, we redeployed $49 million towards water sewer infrastructure. Around 23 was provided to the Water Development Office, and the remaining funds were provided to offset the local match that local governments were imposed on for that water sewer infrastructure ARPA program. So we've put a lot of money towards this, and the value that the Grants Management Office brings is that if the idea of the asset management plan gets expanded, we can actually run a track next to these 3 entities and identify alternative funding mechanisms and sources so that we can strategically identify where we can fund those different types of projects. And then OSLI and DEQ and the Water Development Office can prioritize and deprioritize that asset management plan. And we can conserve the use of our dollars under the SRF program and the MRG program, specifically for those instances that may be emergency related. Also, one other aspect about this slide, the Grants Management Office, we've only been around for a year. Our inception date was July 1 of 2024. We have a 12-to-1 return on investment from what the legislature appropriated for us to stand up our office. In that time, we have received more than 55 technical assistance requests related to water sewer infrastructure. That's at least once a week. Or that's at least 1 technical assistance request every single week. It's actually a lot, and that's only through June 30th of 2025. I know we've at least received 3 or 4 more of those, but through those technical assistance requests, we see that there are a lack of resources for local governments in identifying these alternative funding mechanisms, navigating the funding process and the grants management lifecycle, and some of those typical issues have been identified today. Lack of project planning. There's lack of time. The clerks or treasurers are designated as, hey, you are going to run this program. A public works director that only works 20 hours a week and wears multiple different hats is responsible for these programs. And these are the things that they are not able to meet that the Grants Management Office can assist with. So we are here to help disperse the dollars as quickly as possible, provide support to our state agencies who would like to take on this plan, and we will help them and assist the local governments at the same time if we have to. I would just like to open it up and give it back to the chairman to open it up for any questions.
Chairman.
Commissioner Glick, go ahead.
Okay. I really like that you guys started this grant program. One of the things that, I didn't run into it with you but I did run into it with some federal grants programs. A lot of times you have to have the design, you have to have it stamped, you have to have all of this other stuff in place before you can even get the grant. The problem is getting the engineer paid to get the grant or to get the required documents for the grant. That always makes the process a lot harder. Do you guys do like a design build grant, or is it just strictly construction?
So that's a great question. I'm just going to give some specifics and some facts. We actually don't have any money to give out. We just find money for people to go and apply to, and we help them in that process. I will identify, though, that there is a lack of funding when it comes to planning dollars. And it is very hard to identify planning grants out there, even for water sewer infrastructure, even for transportation, even for wildfire planning. So it's just a lack of planning money to begin with. We have kind of touched on this aspect of utilizing other state agencies to help incorporate comments and opinions about design reviews. If one were to come and ask us, we have not really breached that area though yet. People have asked about it. We just haven't found ourselves in that arena yet where we have to ask a state agency for assistance in a design review.
Oh, I guess it's not really a question. This is more of just a statement. And I realize you could get assistance from other state agencies or programs to possibly help us to get the required documents for the grant. However, it'd be nice if we could find grants that are like design build, and I think the planning portion is going to be the worst part for all of us. And then I know when they were doing, we had these a grant for like the lead removal, like for your Region 8 3 Ts program. We did try to get some of that going, but again, they don't have remediation funds. I mean, they can do certain aspects of the remediation, but when it only goes up to your house, it doesn't go inside the house. There's a lot of those different types of grants that would really need the planning portion. That's the part that really hindered a lot of my progress. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I provide follow-up even though that wasn't a question? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it is very, very difficult. One thing that we try to do at the Grants Management Office is stay nimble. There are sometimes other areas of operations in which a local government or an entity could go out and apply for a grant for those operations and then actually shift that budget for that specific component of their operations to pay for that planning or design project. We have tried to kind of flip things on its side and help local governments in a way like that. Is it easily done? No. But is it something that we continue to think about? Yes, because we are trying to stack and braid funding sources in as many ways as possible to help meet a project's budget or a project goal.
Senator Crum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, thank you guys for working on this and the governor's office as well. I really appreciate it. It's so important. In fact, our community has a major issue right now with stormwater runoff and funding of stormwater in Laramie. The city council passed a fee you probably heard about that's rather large to help deal with the stormwater. In fact, it's costing some of our businesses several $1,000s a month to pay for stormwater, costing the state, the county, the university probably nearly $100,000 a month in fees. Many residents over $100 a month in fees and dealing with stormwater. So I appreciate what you're doing and trying to reach out and help. A question I have is the city of Laramie approached you for help in grant writing and what's it take and what can this committee do to help not only the city of Laramie, but other communities? Because at this point, we're financially crushing many, not only residents, but businesses and governmental agencies as well.
The city of Laramie grant writer has reached out to us and we've been helping her in a couple different areas, I believe. I cannot speak on the specificity of a wastewater or a stormwater project unless I look at it. I will defer to water development and DEQ though.
Mr. Chairman, I am aware of the issue. At this time, I'm not aware of any specific projects that have applied. We might need to see if Sean King can come back up if he's aware of any projects. But Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering also if it might be appropriate to transition to the demo presentation that we have to show the asset management planning tool, because that might help tie into how to prepare communities for these questions, how to help plan those projects, and have financial rates that are feasible for the city and the residents as well.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I may have some follow-up questions if it's okay after the additional presentation. Thank you.
Whoops. Go ahead and continue on. I don't know when you were wanting to dovetail in this asset planning group that was doing the pilot. You'll keep track of that, huh?
Mr. Chairman, yes. And in fact, this is Colin from Cayuga Solution to give the asset management
All right,
planning demo.
perfect.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, representatives, senators, commissioners. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share what we're doing in the asset management plan development phase under the leadership of Jennifer, Sean, and Keenan. We've been trying to create a methodology that's data-driven, that becomes standard and also transparent in helping us understand what we're facing and working together to how to resolve this issue as we move forward. So I need to Eve connect. So when you see this orange, that's so on that. Okay. So asset management, the goal is to manage assets to minimize the total life cycle cost of ownership, owning, maintaining, operating, and replacing these assets while delivering the desired levels of service at an acceptable risk. The objectives of asset management is to establish a data foundation for management, monitor the condition, predict when the failure might occur, and better align annual budget process with projected infrastructure needs, and create a dynamic platform for managing the assets. So to achieve these strategic goals and objectives, what we did was to rely on the US EPA's definition of asset management. To put it simply, the US EPA said, if you could answer the 5 core questions of asset management, then you're on your way to asset management. Number 1, what's the current state of my assets? What do we own? What's the state? What's the conditional state of these assets? Number 2, what's my required level of service? Sean had talked about EPA requirements. We have water pressure requirements. We have water quality requirements. What are my required level of service? Number 3, which assets are critical? There's so many thousands and millions of assets to consider. We have to understand which are more critical than the other so that we could help prioritize these assets in an efficient way. Number 4, what are my best lifecycle cost or best lifecycle management strategies? How do I deliver the service in a most cost-effective but optimized way? And number 5, what's my best long-term funding strategy? How am I going to fund this? So based around these 5 questions, then we developed our project approach. As Jennifer has said before, let's create a data foundation, show what it is that we own and what kind of conditional state that is. So in that data foundation, we're identifying which asset, where is it, what is it, what does it do, what type is it, and how old is it. From there, we try to understand what's the general condition of this asset, how old is it, what's the conditional state. And with all the thousands of assets in the database, we identify which assets are critical to delivering the level of service. Pumps, pipes, absolutely critical. Number 4, understanding the desired level of service. What are we required to do with these assets? Cost to deliver the service, and understanding the funding needs. And number 7, to help communicate. With asset management, what we're trying to do is move away from a reactive state of management to a more proactive state of management. But with data in the future, what we're trying to do is to become more predictive state of management in the future. We're trying to balance the level of service, the cost to provide that service, the funding availability, and the risk associated with it. Where have we done this before? This is not new. In state of Wyoming, we had a project, statewide facility condition assessment project that looked at each of the assets in each of the buildings and identified what kind of condition they are, what are the maintenance gaps, and what's the funding needs to help ensure that these services are provided in these buildings year after year without any interruptions. So in our work, what we have started to do is for the pilot areas that Jennifer has mentioned, develop an asset inventory and an asset registry, which included pipes, valve, hydrants, PRVs, pressure releasing valves, meters, wells, tanks, pumps, and create a comprehensive database that identify what it is that you own and you manage. From there, what we're trying to do is identify the assets that you own, what's the current state of those assets based on the age or based on when the last condition assessment work was done. We're trying to estimate and understand what do we need from these assets moving forward and to be able to communicate that. Now, as I said before, we're working with thousands of millions of assets here. So what we did was then take these data and then start putting it into what's called Asset Management Planning System, or IRIS, Infrastructure Renewal Intelligence System. So this is a face of Wyoming statewide IRIS, which allows the state to be able to visualize the current inventory, but also the current condition and the future needs of the asset. In IRIS, what we're trying to do is establish this platform using data to capture historically when are these assets being replaced, every time they're replaced, how much is being spent. And the reason why we do that is to help understand not only how the cost of assets is changing, but also to understand the mean time between failure of the assets that we're managing. And this includes the pipes, the valves, the pumps, the motors, the MCCs, and many other high-priced items that we are using to manage the assets. Using this information, then we're able to compare and contrast it against the best practice estimated useful lives from the American Water Works Association, from the EPA, or from manufacturer standard to help understand how much time do we have until we expect the replacement need to take place. So we're using decay curves to help estimate that and calculating when and how much each of these assets will need to be replaced and how much it will be when it does that. Now, putting all that thousands and thousands of assets together, then every year we're coming up with asset replacement rehabilitation plan for each of the year, understanding what's the budget required to make sure that we have enough to replace these assets, but also what are they, where are they, and how much are they. Now, as we hope there's a lot of budget, but the reality is that's not the case. So what happens, I'm sorry, I'm not giving you the signal on that, so, is that we use the concept of risk, the consequence of failure, and the probability of failure to help us understand how to prioritize this in an effective way. So we focus on the red assets first, and then we move to the yellow assets, and we monitor the green assets. Our hope is to make sure that the assets stay as green as long as possible, and also to address the red assets before we move on to any other assets in the future. With this system, we'll be able to help understand what our future needs are, the criticality associated with that, but also what is our current funding and how is that impacting the future needs of the asset. So for example, in this particular example, we have $7 million, and then at the $7 million at the end of the 10th year, then we have a backlog of work, and we could see that every year the backlog of work replacement needs is expanding year by year by year. We're just not currently funding enough to address the needs of the future. But if you move to the next slide, please. If we increase the funding, then we can see that after the third, fourth year, it's starting to flatten out. And then one more slide, please. And if you increase it even more, then we're starting to make a big difference. Yeah, there's still assets falling in the lower section, which is assets that should be replaced that haven't been replaced. But from the picture, you can ensure that all the highest risk assets, the red assets, are fully replaced, and what's remaining are what we call low risk assets, where even if it does fail, the impact of that to the public, to the environment, and economically also is minimized as much as possible. So with asset management, and what we're trying to do is create more of a predictive system. IRIS will predict, based on the inventory and the history of the asset, what we this year need to focus on and what we anticipate the condition of that asset to be, where every then service provider will send staff out to go inspect it, and based on that, make a decision. Yes, we'll replace that this year. No, we'll replace that perhaps 2 years from now, and develop a plan. And then we'll utilize the concept of risk to understand which assets are critical, to prioritize it, perform the work, and then the whole cycle repeats. What's very key in what we're implementing this is not a snapshot. And many times what we did was develop an asset management plan and just took a snapshot at that one point in time. What we're trying to do with Wyoming is create a dynamic platform where every water service provider will have access to this. And every time they replace an asset, that asset's condition now changes from poor to new, and the remaining life of the asset is reset. And you'll be able to constantly understand every year what the needs of the asset will be as we move forward. And as you can see, in the state of Wyoming, IRIS, when you click in, you'll see a hierarchy representing every water provider that will be in the database. In our pilot, we have Aspen Pines, Town of Afton, Town of Burns, Town of Chugwater, and City of Rawlins, and City of Sheridan. This is a representative of City of Rawlins water infrastructure system, all the pipes, valves, hydrants that they have. And you'll be able to go into the map, click on it, and see what it is, but also understand what condition of that asset is. The beauty of IRIS is that each of this water service provider will have their own front face. So Afton, this is what Afton looks like. We have Rawlins, we have Sheridan, we have Chugwater. And as they continuously update the data in terms of what got replaced, how much they spent on it every year, what that does, it rolls up to the state level, where the state will have a full dynamic view of the condition profile, the future need profile. And you could even drill down to every water service provider to see what they're asking for and what the needs are, and be able to have a transparent way to understand the future and work with them to help provide the funding necessary to ensure that the level of service is sustained throughout time. Okay. So that's the executive level version on it. So welcome questions.
Committee.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Commissioner Kaylee.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the software you were talking about. Does every entity have access to the IRIS?
Every pilot entity will have an access to IRIS. Yes, sir.
So they actually have to log on to that, or do they have a portal that they log all their assets into?
As long as they have an internet, they just log on, and then they'll be.
Then they could just update it.
Yes.
So if they've already got it in a SCADA system or in MX.
CMMS,
something.
yes.
They can import those.
That's absolutely correct. So, one of the things that we're doing is utilizing what's existing database and then putting that into IRIS. And then in IRIS, what they have is a component called activity. Every year, what are you doing to that asset? Did you replace it? Did you rehabilitate it? Did you do a condition assessment on it? And then that changes the condition profile, and that changes the expected useful remaining life of the asset. Thereby, your future replacement need schedule is constantly changing about. on based on the work that they're doing year by year. And that rolls right up to the state level to be able to see comprehensively or at the individual water survivor service provider level what the needs are going to be. Now, in some other parts of the world, they've made this to be a mandatory in order to request for funding. Not only you have to show us what you need, but also when the funds are provided, show me how that changed the risk profile, how that changed the condition profile. So there's a sort of a give and take on, through the data to being able to see how the infrastructure story is changing over time for many of these service providers.
Can you also follow up? Can you also track the dollars associated with those assets?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So if I'm buying a pump from a certain company and this is what I paid for it, I can look at the city of Rollins, see what they paid for the exact same pump.
Oh, that's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So every time a pump gets recorded in there, it could be, Gold's pump, or it could be,
Yeah.
different types of pump. You have the
Serial
manufacturer of
number,
the
yeah.
pump, you have the size of the pump, and you have the serial number of the pump that gets all recorded. So through time, what we'll be able to track is who paid how much for that pump, but more importantly, how long did that pump last?
Right.
And, I don't want to, cause any trouble for the manufacturers, but, all I'm going to say, data don't lie at the end of the day.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Crum.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple questions. I really appreciate the red, yellow, green chart on there. Back to economic impact. I'm just going to throw out an example. Let's say a system through a storm fails once every 10 years, just for an example. And the damage from that failure is several $1,000s, say $10,000. And the cost to fix the system is $2 million to prevent that failure. Is there something in the red, yellow, green chart that says, hey, it's costing us $2 million to save $10,000 every 2 years for an economic impact of what a failure would cost? Is that built into this system?
Well, I think, it won't calculate that for you, but it will provide the data necessary to help develop a business case evaluation for you to evaluate, does that make sense for us to keep chugging away in this asset when we could just replace it? And this is often the case for pumps and motors, where the technology these days has become so much more efficient that, is it worth buying old parts to keep it going, where you could just invest $30,000, replace a pump, and then have energy savings of over 40% and the operations and maintenance saving throughout time as well. But it will start providing the data necessary to have that kind of business evaluation be performed. Yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, follow is there a way other communities can get in the pilot program, or is the pilot program closed at this point?
Mr. Chairman, I'll tackle that one. Thank you for the question. Right now, the pilot program is closed. And again, the intent was just to pick as broad a variety cross-section of communities as we could, so that we can then get a better understanding of what it might cost to do for the state. It certainly is our intention to open this opportunity up for everybody within the state. As I mentioned previously, right now we have a funding source that we can use to do the drinking water systems. We don't have a funding source that's eligible for the wastewater systems. That's one thing that we are looking for, because it certainly would be more efficient if we could have a contractor do asset management planning for a community and do drinking water and wastewater at the same time, rather than two separate rounds. So right now we're limited with the pilot project, but we are committed to opening this up for other communities statewide.
Thank you.
Nothing would prevent other communities from trying to follow this plan of asset planning, though, and start that ahead of right now.
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. Yeah. If a community wanted to, through their own resources, pursue asset management planning, they could. Again, with the benefits we see to this having to the state and our communities and our citizens, it is something that we're working to launch that assistance program to help communities and pay for the costs. But certainly if somebody wanted to do this on their own, they would be welcome to.
Okay, thank you. Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and kind of along the same lines about the pilot program. We've talked a lot today, particularly this afternoon, about the unique challenges of smaller rural communities. And of course, my district is all small rural communities. What is the smallest community in the pilot program? If you can estimate of the smallest.
I think perhaps Keenan could tell which one. I think it's town of Burns and Chugwater would probably be the two smallest ones that they have.
Any estimate on population?
Under 500, I believe. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe 200 to thousands. So it should be a good.
Yeah.
A question I've got for you is, as you're going through this asset planning program, will you be directing the cities to different funding, grant programs and what have you? Will be actively, we'll take a look at your little red boxes. Will they start trying to get money to start those projects as part of your pilot program?
Yes.
Oh,
Mr. Chairman, I think Representative Larson would like
I'm
to-
jumping the gun, Lloyd.
Transition.
Okay.
So I think all the questions are right, and I really appreciate Senator Crumb's low and over the middle of the plate question on can others play in what else do we need to do, because that's the question. And the problem is we have aging infrastructure all across the state. Hyattville, 79 people, right, up to Laramie, where our single university is at. Without the capacity to replace that aging infrastructure in a timely manner, and many of our assets not reaching their end of the life cycle appropriately. So we've got this problem of aging infrastructure. Director Parfit has suggested to me multiple billions of dollars probably to correct this problem. I may be wrong on that number. I'm looking for a shake of the head here to say that. So as I started fishing into this and looking at this for an interim topic, my next question was, well, you know, what are these silos that we have in place between our agencies? Are they playing together nice in the sandblock? Where's the funding streams coming from? Being familiar with the two SRF funds, how are those being administrative? Are they talking to each other? I think that you've seen evidence today, my legislative colleagues, that they're doing a very incredible job. But what they're doing is that they're administrating programs that come to them, sit on their desk, then wait for the communities to come and apply. And they respond to that in a manner that's appropriate in dealing with that. Then some of the challenges that you've heard about is you then may have a Hyattville that needs pick the infrastructure, water or sewer. They get it designed without malice intended. They get an engineered product that may be adequate for the engineering purpose, but too expensive to operate for a town that has no sales tax revenue. Okay, and so my question to my legislative colleagues is, does the state have a role in this situation we find ourselves in, where we look at replacing infrastructure as traditionally the responsibility of the municipality? And my argument is yes, because of the uniqueness of our small communities and this idea of Wyoming being one community with very long streets. My challenge to you, and Chairman Boner and I have talked about this, and is I think what we have missing here well, this is, of the 8 cylinders, we're probably hitting on 6, and it's all in the executive branch. We have our agencies, we have our governor's office, we have our grants office, all taking these programs, doing very well. I think the absence is legislative direction or policy that says this is the state's role in helping communities with infrastructure, both water and sewer, because in the town of Rock Springs or in Hudson, in my area, or in Glen Rock, the water and the sewer is laying in the same street. And so if you're going to address one, it doesn't make sense to do one and not doing the other. So then how do we develop policy? Well, that's hard to say if we don't know the condition of the assets. So like we're doing with our schools and our state buildings to ensure that major maintenance, routine maintenance, major maintenance, and capital construction costs are appropriate and efficient, we have the capacity to do the same thing on each of the communities. It's my recommendation that we give guidance to, or our legislative support to the agencies to do this statewide assessment of our assets. One that they already have a funding source for, which is the drinking water side. The sewer side, stormwater side, we don't have that capacity. That may be something that we would want to make a request in this next session for. How much would that be? We don't know right now, but put that off to the side. But once you get those assets identified and the condition of those assets listed, then we can better develop our policy and identify the funding stream that would be appropriate. To the point noted, we get this idea that we can come in and fund it at $7 million, and we keep falling behind on the aging or the antiquated infrastructure. We would have to adjust, but there's no way you can determine the amount of money to feed this beast until you understand the condition of the assets. So there's really I think some very specific ways that we can approach this, and it's not going to get done in 3 months. It'll be a multi-year thing, but we should start planning on addressing this problem statewide, because we are falling further and further behind. Our cities and towns and Hyattville's of the world have to come. We have $9 million or $5 million of MRG every money, and there's double, 3 times that. To have $53 million in ARPA money available and $220 million of requests gives you an idea of how far behind we are in renovating or renewing that asset. So my request to my legislative colleagues here, to the chairman, is that we ought to, hopefully we could start planning to consider some type of drill bill draft to say, to do the study of the drinking water and the sewer. And we're going to have to get we don't have those numbers, but by January or November, that might be possible. But I think, I'm not on this committee. I kind of pushed this along a little bit and asked some questions and find it very fascinating. And I think that this is the gap that really gives stability and conformity across the state, because we really need to develop a policy on water and sewer infrastructure moving forward, or it's just going to continue to get worse. So, amen. Any
So,
questions?
Yes,
Chairman?
Representative, I'm trying to figure out how we draft a bill to do something that it looks like we're already doing. So we're not as organized as we could be, but still, we've
Well-
got agencies that are actively doing what you're talking about doing. We might have.
So I think with your permission, that we would see what is necessary for language, if any, on either case. If you would grant us that leeway and then start sharing that with you in preparation for the next meeting to make sure that we kind of have, are addressing that, if that makes sense.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could add to that. So, the agencies already have the authority to undertake this exercise. I don't think we need any more statutory authority. I think we have the rules in place that we need to do. Right now, it's just a matter of funding. We should have a better estimate in November, but if you would like, I believe my staff, I've got Keenan Hinden, our water and wastewater section manager. We've got Sean back at the table. I know they've been working with Colin to come up with some financial estimates. If there's any further information they would like to share, they would be able to provide that if you'd like them to.
Commissioner Glick.
I know there's that's a good deal that you're trying to do with all the assets. It gives us idea where we're going and what can happen. And, you know, and I agree with Larson that, you know, that we do need this, and we're far behind, and I see it all the time. However, one of the things that, you know, might not be included in your package for your assets and stuff, and if there was a way that we could push regionalization and actually put it on there, showing that, yeah, it costs each town this much to run, but if we combined them all, it only costs each town a little bit of money, and that maintenance and operations could be combined, and it would cost a lot less per town, per municipality.
If I may comment on that, that's a wonderful comment. The IRIS program has a hierarchy, and each of the hierarchy shows the water providers on there. And you could group the hierarchy based on, you know, whatever definement that you want. So if you want to see regionally who would fall under that region, we could click on that and show you collectively for that region what the next 10 years or 20 years investment need for that region will be. So help you kind of decide that you know, decision, if you will, with more support for using the data on that. So it's definitely feasible.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And Commissioner Glick, it's, you know, thank you again. We've been working with the grants department, and that's one of the, in our neck of the woods, it makes a lot of sense to take in Fort Washakie, ETD, Pavilion, Lander, Hudson, and Riverton, both on one system, allows for redundancy of water sources and of treatment facilities, and it's not that far apart. And so you're right, but that's part of this whole conversation, is getting conformity across the state for efficiencies, and I think that it's worthy of the conversation.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add real quick. You know, we do, as part of the Water Development Office, master plans. We've talked about those. We get quite a few of those every year. Over the past 20 years, I think we've done 80 or 85 of them. So a small portion, or at least a significant portion of the 320, I think, communities throughout the state. So I do think that this asset management plan and this product could help complement the master planning, because it kind of gets back to the question I heard Senator Crum ask is it better to replace it? Is it better to keep fixing it? And if we have that information, especially when we start talking about regionalization, proximity is not always the plan for regionalization. It depends on growth, which way it's going, what the water sources are, if there's enough water source from one to be able to provide to others. So that's kind of where the personal touch of the master plan and having engineers involved in our hydraulic modeling and understanding how all those communities would work together to do that and then using the asset management plans to understand what are their deferred maintenance on these types of things, and does it make sense to regionalize, or does it make sense, and is it in the long run cheaper to, stay as separate communities? So I think this product will help the stuff that we normally do through our program, and even in the pilot program, the information we've pulled together for these 6 communities in the past has been used to populate the asset management plan. So I think I think we'll see savings, I guess, throughout both agencies by doing this.
Senator Boner.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as far as the path forward, I just wonder, is this something you think may work pretty well, excuse me, in the planning bill? I know we did something similar for aging irrigation infrastructure a few years back. It was just one line in the water planning bill for that year, and it seemed to work pretty well. But I'm also wondering, what the timeline is, assuming we get something appropriated next budget session. Is it be a couple months? It seems like we're, based off the pilot program, how long until we expect a result? I guess I just want to make sure that we have the opportunity for a meaningful discussion next year. It seems like the timeline may be a little tough if we just, get the program going in February.
Maybe I'll answer the first question about the planning bill. So the asset management planning that's being completed right now through the drinking water SRF, or at least the pilot program of that, is funded through the EPA and actually administered through DEQ. So the planning bill being associated with the Water Development Commission throw some questions in there, I guess, on which community or which agency is going to be leading the charge on this, especially on the wastewater side. So my only question would be, is that appropriate? We'd be happy to bring Jennifer along and explain this every time our bill gets in front of them. But if I could see one instance where the legislature could say, well, this needs to be funded through the water development program, not general funds, for example, and then all of a sudden we're using water development funds to fund wastewater asset management planning. So just something to consider.
Representative Larson.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, my other question, please.
Oh, sorry.
yeah.
I have a second question.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, in response to the second part of the question about timelines, our first step is to finish the pilot project, and I'll have to turn it over to my staff, Keenan, to give a better sense of when that will be completed. The step after that would be to follow procurement, to hire a contractor to take things statewide. I think we would like to move forward with the drinking water side of things no matter what. Again, we have some funds identified for that. The timing issue, though, is if we could find funds to do clean water at the same time. Again, it'll be most cost effective to do them both at the same time. But let me have Keenan speak to the pilot project and when that will be wrapped up.
Hello, sorry, Keenan Hendon, Wyoming DEQ. With regards to the pilot project, we're looking to wrap that up September, October of this year. We're wrapping up our kind of final data acquisition and collection of information from a couple of systems to get that finalized. And then we'll do coordination events with Cayuga to figure out next steps going forward with regards to the program. One thing to consider with regards to potentially funding a clean water asset management plan is that may or may not capture the stormwater side of events. I heard a couple of discussions today with regards to stormwater. Could stormwater be included with regards to this asset management plan and program? Absolutely, yes. But funding to capture that data and information might be separate or would need to be included with regards to that clean water funding proposal.
Well,
Yep.
Go ahead, Mark. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, he has a follow-up.
And Lloyd
Okay.
wants to talk too, Mr. Chairman.
Well, all right, I'll start with you.
Okay, all right. Well, and I was just wondering if there might be an opportunity for B11 or something. I mean, I would hate for this to be constrained because of the silos we currently have. And it seems like it may not be that much. Maybe that's another question. But I was just wondering if there's something we can do before February to get the other side of it funded sooner rather than later. Recognizing maybe there's something else, perhaps the governor's office can do. But I'm sure Representative Larson knows more about that sort of stuff than me.
Representative Larson.
So thank you. I think, I think to the B11 conversation would particularly come back to the agencies, and if they felt that they had some general funds or federal funds that would by chance qualify, that then would qualify for a B11 transfer. And fair question that we could certainly request them to look at, and that would then, of course, hinge on projected costs to do that. So let's just make the assumption that no. I think you're right. I think that we should look at that. But I think that we should really, it doesn't make sense in my mind to move ahead doing one when you could just be doing the other at the same time. And so the potential is if we're looking at doing general funds to fund sewer and stormwater together, and I think that you would want to do that, to do water, clean water and or sewer and stormwater, that could delay then the drinking water side because you would want to do them together. So there's the risk on that, and I think it's worth a conversation, you know, after this to really try to figure out the best way to navigate that. But you know, we're going to have all of that. We'll have all of that information on drinking water, and not to have any on stormwater just seems not the wisest thing to do.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, just one thing. So the stormwater is a good piece. I mean, is that in there or not? And it's not in there. And other similar thing is fire protection rolled into public water? How are we addressing fire protection at all?
Mr. Chairman, I would say fire protection is not part of the programs that we implement. However, I believe the platform that Cayuga Solution has built can do a wide variety of infrastructure. So, Mr. Chairman, if Colin wants to expand on that, I'll turn it over to him.
Okay.
I may have a follow-up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to Jennifer's comment. Yeah, the IRIS has a capability to accept any type of asset. You know, I mean, some of our client is a full citywide, so it's everything that the city owns and manages, including water, wastewater, stormwater, buildings, parks, roadways, fleet, you know, so anything that you want to put in there, we're happy to add in there.
And certainly, I mean, especially in this day and age, I think we all can agree that fire protection is a critical issue, infrastructure piece, and it's certainly in many cases water dependent and water supply dependent. And it seems like, you know, this be interesting to see how the state wants to address fire protection or just maybe ignore fire protection. I don't know.
Director.
Mr. Chairman, it's a very good comment. And again, I think there's a lot of opportunity for what a community would want to include in a plan. And I think we're open to those ideas. One limitation we have to consider is the funding source that we have in eligibility requirements. So the funds we have currently, again, anything related to drinking water is likely eligible. For the wastewater side, certainly sewage and stormwater would be eligible under the Clean Water SRF. That's the funding source that we are looking for right now. I think if we wanted to add in other types of infrastructure, again, recognizing their importance, we would just have to make sure they're eligible for whatever funding source we have, particularly if it were federal. Mr. Chairman, I think if we can take another minute, my staff, Keenan, has something to add to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, one of the other initiatives that we're pursuing through the SRF program is an emergency response contractor. That emergency response contractor is to essentially assist our public water systems around the state to develop a response plan to help mitigate, perhaps whether it's a forest fire, cyber, man-made event, and things of that nature. So with that kind of study moving forward as well, we could incorporate and roll that into our asset management program to kind of combat not only fires, forest fires, man-made events as well. So there are some initiatives in place, but yeah, looking forward to seeing where we're going. .
Okay, no further questions, I guess. So if we're going to draft, we're not going to do it just yet. We've got public testimony, but I'm still trying to figure out what kind of a bill we'll draft if we do, and or if we're going to review more next meeting. My plan is, I haven't asked management council, but I'm thinking we'll have 2 more meetings. I don't know how we can avoid that. We'll have the next one in November and a final meeting in January, I believe, is the way we usually do it. So give me an idea what your thoughts are.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think that I could work with anybody on the committee, or if you want to just say, Lloyd, sit on your hands and we'll just have our committee do it, that's fine too. But work with our agencies and kind of put together what we feel would be an appropriate bill to then start the ball rolling in your next meeting.
Sounds good. Now, I'm thinking we might have, are you done? That was really a good presentation, everybody. Oh, Director, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, the only other request I would have with that, we could be working with LSO and Josh Anderson and help in drafting that.
Of course.
Okay, thank you.
But it'll probably, the beginning of it will be the next meeting, correct? Okay. I think we might have public testimony. So I'd like to get to that if there is any, and I'm not sure why everybody's here. Do we have public testimony on this particular subject?
Mr. Chairman, we have Director McComey, and we also have, where to go? The Wyoming Association of Municipalities as well online.
Okay. Go with Director McComey first. Go ahead when you're ready, sir.
We're having a few technical difficulties, Mr. Chairman.
Would it work better to go with municipalities first?
Director McComey is now online.
Yes. Ah, there you are. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize I couldn't be there today. I'm traveling the northern part of the state and actually sitting in the laundry room at a motel. So hopefully somebody won't come in and start up the laundry and not be able to hear me. So appreciate the opportunity today to talk a little bit about asset management. As was noted earlier with one of the slide presentations, the state construction department has been using an asset management system for state buildings and the K-12 schools. Started back on this journey in about 2016 or 2006, excuse me, on the school facilities side. And we began using asset management, looking at all of the buildings on the K-12 side, and have progressed from, as Mr. Chang talked about, kind of a static one-time look to the model that you saw the presentation on today. When we, our most recent data assessment for schools was done about 2 years ago. We looked at all the K-12 schools and ancillary buildings and then downloaded that data into our AIM database, Facility Force Asset Management System. We had about 55,000 photos went in to that, all the tags on various types of equipment, and then aged those out. So we have a 20-year look into the future as our components to the buildings are aged. And so it gives us a really good snapshot in time, not only as of 2 years ago, but forward looking. And as was described in the previous presentation, Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, talking to.
Okay. I don't know if you could hear me
Okay.
before I started. I've been kind of talking for a little bit here, but wanted to address the asset management aspect of what the state construction department is doing for the state buildings and the K-12 schools. We started that journey back in about 2006, using asset management on the school side of the department. And so we assessed all the K-12 schools and ancillary buildings back at that point in time. It was static, as Mr. Chang referred to earlier in his presentation, in 2006 through 2016. About every 4 years, we would assess those buildings. Today, we have a management system that is dynamic. We can assess out through 20-year lifespan into the future of what our buildings conditions are and the various assets within the building. We're currently assessing all the state buildings, and we'll enter that into our asset management system, our AIM database system. It's very robust, as was described earlier. In the latest assessment that we did on our K-12 schools, we had 55,000 individual photos and over 3 million.
You just disappeared, Director.
Yeah, I guess my going down on this. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
It's freezing up. Okay. Can you give me an idea of what I've already said to this point, or at what point did I get cut off?
Well, you've kind of, what's that? 55,000 photos. You were going through the assessment of the school
Okay.
system and what we have.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with all that data, we have over 3 million data points also associated with that on the various components within the school buildings. And so we're able to forecast now, not only from the snapshot in time, as was done.
It's just not going to work. Director, we're
Sorry,
having
Mr.
a hard
Chairman.
time coming and going.
Yeah, I'm remote right now. I'm up in Sheridan, and it keeps cutting out every couple minutes. I guess to kind of make it short here in case it cuts back out. So we have a dynamic system very similar to the Cuyahoga system for state buildings. We can now 20 years in the future. We can make risk assessments, as was mentioned earlier. We can modify the system as we make additional work to the system. So if we replace something, we can take that off, give a new end date, and be able to move forward. And
Well, you just cut out on us again. I think we've got the general idea. And your suggestion is we would
I'm
use
going
a
to turn
similar
the camera
plan
off and see if that helps with the bandwidth, to see if we can keep going. Let's see. What do I shut off this? Yeah. Okay. Mr. Chairman, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So what we're able to do now is do forecasting into the future, up to 20 years. When we do work on a system, we recalibrate where that's at. So it gives us an overall view of the system and where we're at on our buildings. I think because of the dynamics and how it's evolved from a static system into a dynamic system gives us much better forecasting.
Well, you just cut out on us again. The audio is not working
Yeah,
by
I'm sorry,
itself either.
Mr. Chairman. I don't know. I'll keep it short so it doesn't cut off
think
so quickly.
We've got a pretty good idea that you like the way it's set up for school facilities. And if we could, we'll kind of move on with some testimony. Try to get this thing moving along if you don't mind, Director.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. All right. Can you bring Wham on now?
They are online, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Justin Schilling, Deputy Director with the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. Apologies for not being there in person today. We had 3 meetings in 3 separate cities. So we were spread a little bit thin, but I appreciate the opportunity to testify virtually. Do want to thank all the folks that were on the presentation panel for their hard work on behalf of our cities and towns, and the critical infrastructure that those cities and towns deliver to the 70% of Wyoming that lives in a city or town. When Representative Larson had talked about this idea and trying to get our arms around municipal infrastructure needs and kind of the state of the inventories, and one thing became incredibly clear incredibly fast, and that was that many of our communities, just through attrition of staff or trying to keep track of records of some of these systems that go back 100 years, just don't have a very good idea of what they've got in the ground. When it was put there, what its service life was supposed to be, and what it might take to come up with a priority list of what they need to try and keep their water systems going, so they're not constantly just trying to deal with failures as those come up. So very much in the support of the idea of what they're working with the contractor on this asset management project. Very excited to see the results of the pilot. I think it's an excellent opportunity for the state to really understand, to get good hard number information and to understand what the municipalities are going to need over these next years and decades, to keep these water systems moving, and again, to avoid the even more costly option of just continually fixing things as they fail. So with that, I would stand for any questions. I don't want to tread over ground that's already been covered, but I would be glad to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Questions, committee? Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll hear from the irrigation side of things here soon, where we actually have quite a few state statutes that prohibit districts from saving for future expenditures, or seem to at least. Is there any similar restrictions for municipalities or anything in general that's sort of holding you back that we could make a little bit easier for you so you can maybe be a little bit more aggressive in attacking this infrastructure problems?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, through you, Senator Boner, Mr. Co-Chair, appreciate that question. We actually posed that question out to membership to see if we could solicit some responses. I'll be honest, a lot of what they came back was federal level issues. Of course, the lead service line program or that effort is a big concern for a lot of our folks, and it sounds like there may be some changes coming to some of the timeframes and those kinds of things on that. The one thing that I had actually three separate communities mention was the operator minimum, to have two certified or licensed operators in each community. Some of our communities that have their own water systems, to have 2 of those operators, which they're not inexpensive employees, but a town of 50 people, to pay 2 of those operators to be compliant with that rule. While I think it's a totally prudent rule, you have to have that kind of redundancy, but I wonder, as we've opened this door, the conversation of regionalization, maybe those kinds of things, if the second operator couldn't be shared between a couple communities, if they're in close proximity, or, you know, if there couldn't be some thinking in that direction to where, you know, communities can maybe kind of cost share that redundancy. But other than that, we didn't get anybody that really came forward with anything that was statutory, that was really holding them up from being able to do their jobs with delivering these resources.
Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, and for the committee, one of the challenges that communities have that we tried to address maybe 5, 6 years ago is they have, and it was created in the Constitution at the time with the founders as a 4% cap indebtedness on sewer. And the cost of sewer infrastructure, that's not much anymore. And so that's one that, and I will put together, we done a constitutional amendment that failed to raise that up. I'll get that information and get that back to the committee to review, but that is a limiting factor.
Not seeing any more questions. Do we ever have any more online or public testimony on this?
Mr.
Okay,
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, if I could just
Yes.
offer one more comment, I apologize.
Go ahead, Justin.
While we are not under the savings constraints that other subdivisions are when it comes to our water systems, there's been some legislative wind, I think, in questioning some of our reserves that our communities have. And in very many cases, those reserves that they've set aside are long-term planning reserves for these water projects that they know are out on the horizon, but because of their revenue structure, they have to save up for those things. So we're doing our best to educate folks, not only the legislature, but the public on, why some of those numbers are what they are. Because certainly, it can look askew when you look at the balance sheet and a small town has $1 million put away. But if they know their water tower's failing or that their water tower's got a few more years left and that's it, a lot of times there's a story. So I think I just appreciate everybody's efforts on the committee. And I think you understand better than most, kind of what it takes to piecemeal these things together from a funding standpoint, but just the idea of, not having some sort of cap or those kinds of things added with our reserves, I think is going to be an incredibly thing to sort of stand pat on, because I think our communities are very responsible about it. But I just think that's the situation that they're in, that they just have to play the long game on some of these projects.
Thank you. So if there's no more testimony on that, we're going to move on to the irrigation infrastructure. And if you're okay with that, Senator, you're the one who's worked on this the most. I'll let you kind of orchestrate that part of it.
I believe I have a LSO memo. Maybe we'll start there. And Mr. Anderson, if you want to go over that from wherever you feel comfortable. And yeah, we'll start there.
And we had quite a bit of this a couple days ago in the workshop. So as briefly as we can get through it, it'd be best. A bunch of us need to travel home tonight.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Josh Anderson, LSO. I know Water Development Office has a piece on this as well. But as you'll see in your materials, I did just a brief white paper, and I can just go pretty high level on this. Chairman Boner asked me to look into whether irrigation districts would have the ability to pool funds to provide savings accounts for these large major maintenance projects for irrigation projects. So again, we looked primarily at irrigation districts, watershed improvement districts, and water conservancy districts. A very high level, short answer is statutory provisions don't appear to provide for assessment specifically to build these types of major maintenance funds. There are some references to sinking funds for public irrigation districts and water conservancy districts, but those are primarily to pay for indebtedness of those districts rather than set aside funding for major maintenance. In the special districts chapter, there is a provision for accumulated reserves. That section would apply to watershed improvement districts and water conservancy districts, but the specific provisions that are noted in the memo related to those districts would still apply. So again, it wouldn't appear to specifically authorize them to add additional assessments to fund those types of reserves. So those are kind of my findings in brief, Mr. Chairman, and be happy to take any questions.
Questions, committee? Yes, Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh, thank you for the memo. It was actually very helpful to kind of understand the landscape, which is a little bit blotchy, a little bit disconnected. Every district that was created kind of had its own rules, which probably had importance at the time. But as we look at this, is you're thinking that if we're going to do something, it should be kind of across the board in these districts as opposed to trying to pick a few that we're concerned about in the moment? Just wondering what your thoughts are about that, about the remedy here that we might do statutorily.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, I think, of course, a lot of that's probably a policy decision for you guys, but I do think it makes sense. And as you'll see, there is kind of that special districts section that's applicable to most types of special districts, but again, not specifically to irrigation districts. And so I think to the extent you could make it more uniform, it might be helpful.
Thank you.
Senator Boner.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so the kind of genesis of this was what happened in La Perelle Irrigation District, where that district did have a thought of trying to save up for replacing the dam. They knew that was going to happen about 10 years ago, and they got told by their attorney, you have to submit it to a judge every year, your budget, and so that you cannot do that. And they're actually prohibited by statute from doing so because you're limited to only basically your ongoing operations. These large expenditures are excluded. And so I think that's an opportunity for improvement. If we're looking at, we have the information, we have that irrigation infrastructure analysis that happened a few years ago. We just closed out this morning. So they have information. And what if we have empowered them to be able to save for that, maybe do so in a way which pools funds in the state treasurer's office, similar to the Wild Star accounts, to realize a greater rate of return. I think those are the policy considerations we have, at least from my perspective, but welcome everybody's perspective here as well. That doesn't have to be the only solution, but I think if we allow for a limited ability to save funds, if it's something that's identified on that list, so you can't just do it whatever. I think there's a reason why this is in statute, probably. You can imagine why. We don't want, $10 million in a little irrigation district with no reason, right? But if you tie it to an actual project, what the timeline is, that'll actually help with the investment strategy, right? And maybe there's a role the state can play to not just provide information, but provide ability to realize a great rate of return as they save up for these projects.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to that, I totally agree with everything you just said about finding a solution. Clearly, we've strapped them, and there were reasons perhaps for it, but in terms of planning and dealing with this aging infrastructure to do their part, even though there may be parts for others to do in that, to aid in that effort. But I do believe we need to address that and may need to consider other types of districts that may have similar problems coming up in the future, rather than just piecemeal this one. That was what I was kind of getting to, and I agree with you that there needs to be some specificity and constraints on that. But we definitely know what the problem is right now and will continue to be a problem, and that should definitely be included. So I agree 100%.
Further discussion? Representative Chestic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is not a topic for today, but maybe for the next interim, should we add a topic or ask for a topic to kind of comprehensively look at these special district laws to maybe find a way to consolidate them or to reconcile them? Or that's a big project we can't do with this interim, of course, but that seems to be the better solution, is to try and we're kind of off track here, and it's very confusing, and that's never good.
Go ahead, Representative Lawley.
Thank you. I do think there should be a look by a legislative committee overall concerning how we've done special districts in a piecemeal way, but whether or not more uniformity might be better for those special districts and how they're trying to operate, as well as the legislature in terms of any oversight. So, but I would just suggest that maybe select water, because it's broader. These are broader than just districts that include water and irrigation. There's many special districts, so perhaps that might be under the jurisdiction of another committee that's more broad. I'm thinking like corporations, but anyway, that's just my thought. But
Okay, thank you. So do we have public testimony on this? All right. We're good? All right, next we have interstate agreements in the Colorado River Basin, an update from the state engineers. He still with us? There you are, Brandon. Come on up and tell us how that's going along.
So we're just gonna wait to the end to do bill drafts and.
Yeah, I think we can do that without the.
That's true. Yeah.
Or should we? We just got it.
It's where.
Okay.
Just making sure it gets.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Brandon Gebhardt, State Engineer.
And I'm Chris Brown with Wyoming Attorney General's Office.
Mr. Chairman, we've got a very brief slide to kind of work through this presentation, but we're in front of you today as part of the commitment we made to the committee in May. Maybe could be viewed as a threat that we would be back, but we're back to present some of the couple of updates and some of the information that we learned through some public meetings and some meetings with our advisory committee. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Just very quickly, what we talked about last time was the idea to develop a pilot voluntary conservation program in our portion of the Green River Basin. And that all ties into a lot of what you read in the newspapers about the Colorado River, and specifically the post 2026 operations of Lake Mead and Lake Powell. So the last time we were in front of you, we provided you a brief background of the history of the Colorado River. We described some of the apportionments and uses of the water. We described the post 2026 negotiations. We discussed the risk of not getting to a consensus agreement, and kind of highlighted the value that we think that this voluntary pilot conservation program could help us lead to a consensus agreement, which is very important because I think the consensus agreement is the only way where we would avoid either litigation or Congress making decisions for us. At that meeting, we informed the committee that our next steps were to work with the advisory committee and engage in stakeholder and public outreach. So today we're providing an update on the progress we've made. And I've also got a couple of updates on the negotiations themselves. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So the first update that I don't think we talked to the committee about last time was, when do we have to have a consensus agreement? We discussed that this is part of a NEPA process led by the Bureau of Reclamation. And I think that the newest piece of information to bring to you today is when that needs to be inserted into that NEPA process, when that consensus agreement does. So what we've learned since we last met with you, that Reclamation has given the states till November 11th of 2025 to develop and submit the framework for that consensus agreement. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So this is also something new since the last meeting, but it is largely what we're discussing among the 7 basin states. The concept that would then develop into the framework of what could hopefully be the consensus agreement. So the concept seems pretty simple. The concept is to determine what the Lake Powell releases would be, which also means the lower basin supply. So that would be determined by some percentage of an average of the natural flow at Lee Ferry. And I'll explain the natural flow. But what we're talking about is really 3 key parameters. One is how many years of the natural flow do we use to determine the average period. Currently, the states are tentatively agreeing that 3 years for an average is appropriate. There's also going to be likely an upper and a lower release limit from Lake Powell. Part of that is at low limits, environmental concerns arise. We have issues with the dam physically passing both minimum and maximum flows. You got the Grand Canyon blowout, so there's a lot of factors in those releases. And then the third part, which is probably the stickiest part, is what percentage of that natural flow can we agree to? And so that's the discussion we're having. So conceptually, this concept then would say that the upper basin would take the necessary actions to satisfy that release percentage, and then the lower basin would take the necessary actions to live within that available supply. So what actions are we talking about specifically for the upper basin? The same actions that we've been talking about since we submitted our upper basin alternative in March. March of 24, excuse me. So we're talking about really 2 main components. One is to use what are called the CRISP-A upstream initial units. Those are the reservoirs that were built in the upper basin to help us with our development as well as maintain our compact obligations. And they consist of Flaming Gorge, Aspinall, and Navajo. And as part of this agreement, we would define how those releases are made, when recovery occurs, those types of things. The second component is voluntary conservation in the upper basin. So it'd likely be a statewide or a upper basin program. And that's the reason we brought the pilot conservation program to this committee in May. It is a temporary, voluntary, and compensated water conservation program. The intent is to develop something that works for Wyoming, but could also play into a larger upper basin program. The next slide. Very quickly, just so you understand, as part of the equation, the natural flow. What we're talking about is the natural flow. In this case, you take a gauge flow, which in this case is Lee Ferry. So you measure the water that flows over that. And then you add in the effects of man-made diversions and or reservoirs to determine what would be the natural flow absent influence. So that's generally what natural flow is. This is calculated each year by Reclamation, so it is a known number each year. So it makes sense to base it off of that. Anything to add at this point? So that's really the concept that we're talking about. And we have multiple meetings on that. We've established meetings probably every other week at this point, and then many, many more in between those basin state meetings. So now we'll get into what we talked about at the last meeting. We committed to this committee that we would be going out and seeking outreach, public and stakeholder comments to this pilot voluntary conservation program. So on July 21st, we met with the Colorado River Advisory Committee in Green River. On the 22nd, we met, we had a public meeting in Pinedale. And then on July 28th and 29th, we met in Lyman and Baggs. And so as we see the next steps going forward, the first one is what we're doing today is updating this committee and receiving direction. We also intend to start developing draft legislation for a pilot program. We then intend to share that legislation with the advisory committee, water users, and interested organizations for comments and feedback. Then we'd hold another advisory committee meeting to review the draft legislation and then present this draft legislation to the Select Water Committee and LSO prior to the November 6th meeting. Next slide. So in our main meeting, we provided you with a bulleted list of framework that we thought would start developing legislation. So what we presented to the public and to the advisory committee is that same list with a little more detail. The detail we provided is in the form of, here's what we're thinking. There are questions in there just to get the conversation going to help spur that conversation. So the first one we discussed again was the findings and the purpose, and I'm not going to read these slides, you guys will have them, but kind of threw out our ideas of what would go on the finding and the purposes. What started thinking about what kind of definitions we would need for this legislation. And then we had a pretty good discussion on what the process was. This is how water right holders can apply for participation, how applications are considered, and the potential for needed remedies if an application approved or denied, and also potential remedies that a water right holder who may be affected by somebody else participating, could they make an appeal? So those were kind of the thoughts and discussions that we had. And so some of the discussions that we had with the public and the advisory committee, I think we heard that the public thinks that we need a sufficient notice. We heard a lot about the nature of the interconnectedness of these systems within our state, and we get that. And so they need to understand that if their neighbor is going to participate, that may impact them. So they would like to know when that occurs. I think we also heard a number of comments that this process needs to be robust, but not too complicated. It needs to be workable, but yet protects the Wyoming water users. We also had some discussions about how is the best way to provide these notices to the public. Some of the ideas we heard is through our website or our websites, email, text, notices in public places. I think one of the things we're realizing on some recent news about newspapers, a lot of those newspapers that are no longer around were in the area where we need to provide this notice. So we need to get creative on how we provide that notice. We also had some thoughts and questions about irrigation districts and ditch companies and how would this work within those? If one entity wanted to participate, how would the district be involved? And I think that they should probably have a role somehow in the management decisions of these applications. So we think we need to work that into either the rules or the legislation. Next slide, please. The no injury. I think we stated this to this committee as well as to the public, that there will be a no injury clause in any legislation for a program like this. Some of the conversation that we had with the public was that, yes, this needs to be part of it, but we also tried to explain that water right holders can exercise their real property right in a legal way without creating an injury to a water right. Some of these may impact other people, but from a water right perspective, it's not an injury to that. This includes things like a person does not have to divert their water and use their water in any given year. They can use that water to extinction. They can change their irrigation practices. They can convert from a flood irrigation to side rolls to center pivots. They can change their crops. That's within their right to exercise their water right. They can make on-farm efficiency improvements. While these may be impactful to their neighbors, it does not create an injury to the water right. So we had a lot of discussion on that. We did receive one comment that suggested that the legislation could tighten the injury definition for participation in this program. That is true. I think we need to be very thoughtful of that, because as you start doing that, then are you creating an injury or requirement from another water right holder to exercise the rights that he has? So we need to think thoughtfully about that. The next item of the framework for the legislation was consumptive use considerations. We received some questions about how are we going to estimate the CU, the conserved consumptive use, by somebody participating in that. We talked about the potential for looking at some of the generalized ways we do it currently in statute. One example would be the temporary water use agreement. We also talked about using what the Upper Colorado River Commission has adopted in remote sensing. It seems that the states all agree that the remote sensing for the upper basin is kind of the preferred way. So maybe that's something that we would use in a program like this to estimate the conserved consumptive use. I think that helps with integrating a Wyoming program into a larger upper basin program as well. We also had some concerns about the ability to participate and or conserve in drought and in dry hydrologies. That is something that we've recognized. I think it's something that we convey in our conversations with the 7 states, that I think the way we view it is that the most effective way to conserve is in the average or wet hydrology years. That's our best chance. But in doing so, then we would store that, and then that stored water provides the insurance to help us meet the obligations in drier times. So that was a good discussion with everybody as well. We did hear several comments encouraging us to seek maximum flexibility in what we consider for conserved consumptive use. Flexibility also includes potentially water banking, conserved consumptive use when you improve the efficiency, and potentially exchanges as part of this program. The next topic that we talked about is the abandonment. I think we didn't get a lot of feedback on this, but we did see a lot of head nods that, yes, I think everybody wants to protect their water right if they participate in a program like this. Take a drink real quick. excuse me. The next topic that we discussed with everybody was the shepherding. And we did hear and had some pretty good discussions on shepherding. I think we heard both support and questions concerning shepherding. We heard a lot of people expressing their need for free river and the value that that provides them. And so they don't want a program like this to interfere with their ability to use that free water or their seconds. And so the shepherding question plays into that in order to shepherd, do you have to shut off free river in order to shepherd? So that was a concern that we heard. I think our response to that is that we've got several studies going on right now, and some of those are aimed at trying to figure out if we can do the accounting of conserved water without shepherding. So as we sit here today, I don't feel like we have proven that we can't do that at this time. So we are still not seeking shepherding as part of this pilot program. We did convey that we don't want to create a bait and switch. It may be necessary in the future, and that's something that we would investigate and discuss at a future time. But for right now, I think until we've proven that we can't do it without it, our preference is to not shepherd. Continuing on, the export statute exception, we mentioned that, not a lot of discussion on that. We did mention as a starting point within this program would be to utilize Fontenelle Reservoir. We did gain formal support from the advisory committee to focus on Fontenelle as part of this program. And some of the reasons why we're thinking of Fontenelle is that it's unique. It's the largest reservoir in our portion of the basin. It has the largest amount of uncommitted storage. It's situated below a significant portion of the irrigated uses in our basin. And we also have the exclusive right to contract for any of the uncommitted storage. So it lends itself, and we are working with Bureau of Reclamation to secure that additional storage and space in Fontenelle right now. As we do that, we are thinking of this conservation program. We are thinking of water banking. We are thinking of how can we use that to meet our downstream obligations. So we are seeking the maximum flexibility within the contracts that we would sign with Reclamation for that additional storage. As I mentioned, the advisory committee provided a formal recommendation supporting the exploration of the pilot conservation program and pursuing the ability to store water in Fontenelle as part of a broader conservation program. They did offer some qualifications. They feel that any stored water released from Fontenelle should be for three main purposes. One is only for the beneficial uses in Wyoming through direct delivery, to mitigate the impacts of curtailment or involuntary reductions on Wyoming water right holders, and to help satisfy any portion of Wyoming's interstate compact obligations. And they also qualified that projects should not be approved if it injuriously affects the water rights of other appropriators. So back to the injury discussion. And then some of the other that discussions that we had that aren't necessarily tied directly to some of those framework bullets. Particularly in Bags and Lyman, the location for this program. Bags, for example, in order to deliver the water, the conserved water to the system, it's got to go through Colorado. That makes it very difficult for us to account for that now. But I think once we develop an upper basin program, that becomes much easier. We'll have agreements with Colorado and the other states to help us with that. And then we also have situations where the streams where people could conserve on, the tributaries, even if they conserve, water in that stream dries up before it gets to the Green River. And that makes it very difficult to account for and show that water, conserved water, is meeting the intended use of it. So right now, I think we need to continue to investigate those opportunities when feasible, and then make some determinations when more information is available as we think through this. We also heard some comments that portions of our basin, we have diversions without measurement devices. We had a lot of discussion and some presentations on a measurement and telemetry program that is out on the streets right now, in which the program through the Upper Colorado River Commission, using federal money, could help fund some of the equipment needed to install these measurement devices. So that is in the works right now. I think we also heard the desire that the program needs to be able to be part of the larger upper basin program, yet unique to Wyoming, to make sure that it works for Wyoming. And then I think my final bullet that I wanted to discuss, we heard a lot that we need funding for this conservation. I don't disagree. And I think what we're contemplating right now, that if we get to a consensus agreement, I think that the federal government will see a need to help fund conservation, both in the upper basin and the lower basin. So I think right now that's kind of what we're contemplating for potential funding of this program. We also may have an opportunity through some of the existing funding that is being held up in DC right now that maybe could kickstart some of these programs and projects. So that's kind of what we're thinking for now. I think that's my presentation. I'd offer, did I miss anything, Chris, that you want to add to, or?
No, just wanted to give a high level of what we've done since the last time. And then I think Brandon laid out that for our anticipation is to take what we've learned and put together some draft legislative language, take it out to folks for additional comments so they can see the words, what we're actually thinking, and then bring that product back to you before your May or November 6th meeting. That's our next steps.
Questions, committee? Thank you for the update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So we are on prescriptive easements and an amendment to some former legislation we just passed. And Larry, thanks for hanging around.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is actually should be pretty brief. Just a little background for the committee. In 2023, the Select Water Committee sponsored legislation. They worked on it 2 years, just basically codifying all of the Supreme Court rulings, AG's opinions, and put that in a form that provided in the statutes, allowing for prescriptive easements for irrigation water conveyance mechanisms. That passed in 2023. That's now in statutes. One of the things that we did not contemplate at the time is the misuse of a prescriptive easement, or a prescriptive easement that's challenged for purposes of, I've got more money than you and I've got really good attorneys, and so I'm just going to take you to court. And so what contemplated in the interim topic to look at is just provide some legal remedy for landowners or canal companies or ditch companies or irrigation districts or private landowners under scenarios where, and I'll just give you two what ifs, and one of them has actually already occurred that kind of brought this to a head, is what happened if I claim a prescriptive easement and my ditch crosses 15 different landowners, and I go in there and I clean that ditch far in excess of what's allowed under the statutes for prescriptive easements. Well, the current situation is basically you got to file a lawsuit against that individual. You go to district court, you hash it out. And if you win, it costs you a lot of money on expert witnesses and attorneys and all that stuff. And so the reverse of that is this, let's say that you're a ditch owner and you want to go in and you want to exercise your prescriptive easement, but somebody just continually harasses you from a standpoint. And we've had a scenario like this up in the basin where a extremely wealthy new landowner to the state continually harassed the ditch company about entering their property and the lawsuits that would follow if they tried to exercise a prescriptive easement. So it really goes both ways. So some may be exercising a prescriptive easement that go way outside of the easement, and some may use what I call lawfare to preclude somebody from utilizing. Both times, the person that's trying to exercise that is going to bear the entire financial burden associated with any court expert witnesses to exercise that. So the interim topic was just to include in the prescriptive easement language a legal remedy for entities that either were outside the prescriptive easement or somebody that wanted to use lawfare to preclude somebody from exercising their prescriptive easement. And so basically in those two scenarios, it would just require, if you file a lawsuit against somebody and you fail because you do not, or you were outside your prescriptive easements, you would recoup your attorney and expert witness fees. It's just to level the playing field to make sure that we're not putting the burden on the wrong people. If you're either using it as a weapon, lawfare as to keep somebody out, or if you're outside of your prescriptive easement. So I visited with our LSO with Josh earlier a little bit about this. So it's just to go into that existing statutes and carve that out and provide that legal remedy in those cases where you're either outside or somebody uses it and then they file a lawsuit against you and it takes tens of thousands of dollars to defend it, and you may prevail. So, but it still costs you a lot of money. And there is a couple of real world examples where that's happened. And so again, it's just basically adding a little section, providing a legal remedy under those type of scenarios, Mr. Chairman. So my recommendation would be just to have Josh draft that up, and you can look at it at the next commission meeting to see what that legal remedy would look like in that language. I'd stand for any questions.
Questions, committee? Representative Cheswick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Hicks, for bringing this to us. Is your idea to include the fee shifting provision in every case when a prescriptive easement is being litigated, or only in certain egregious cases, and in which case you have to find a standard for what's an egregious case? You could go either way. What is your intent?
So it would be available for anybody, but I think the only time that you're ever going to go through that process is under those egregious cases. And so anybody could basically come in and litigate under, you went outside your prescriptive easement, right? Or you exercise your prescriptive easement and then somebody litigates you. And so, you're an attorney, so you might be able to help out with this. But it's got to be available. And in the real world, it's probably only going to be actually litigated in those points. In fact, this is designed to preclude, or I should say not preclude, but deter potential litigation in these cases. And people just work within what the intent the statute says, is that you have a prescriptive easement and you're entitled to do that. So you may have some thoughts on that.
Follow up?
As follow-up, I guess I'm thinking out loud, as first I've heard this idea. Would you create the remedy of the fee shifting provision to be exercised in the discretion of the judge? So the judge decides what's an egregious case or not, and the judge could say no fee shifting, or if the judge thinks there was some outrageous or egregious example, then the judge would have the power to fee shift.
I haven't contemplated that, whether that would be left up there or it would be left up in the statute, just to say that that's available if you pursued in the lawsuit and you wanted that awarded, that would have to be up front. You know, to say, look, under this litigation, ultimately, if you lost, and we write that, depending on how we craft the statute, right, you'd automatically be available for those costs, or you may have to request those costs. And so, and I know we've got a couple of attorneys on there, so this is the first time to take a look at this. We kind of did something like this when we addressed the eminent domain laws back in about 2012, 2013. At that point in time, if you contested an eminent domains taking, even if you were successful, it was at 100% of your cost, and which really discouraged people, particularly the largest user of eminent domain is YDOT. You know, are you really going to take on the state or the federal government or something and over a few $1,000s, even though it's a takings of your property? And so we included that provision. If you do go to court and you prevail, you can also ask for your attorney's fees and expert witnesses to be compensated to level that playing field under the use of eminent domain. So that's the rationale. We've already done this with the use of eminent domain. It's just now applying it to prescriptive easements. So again, first time, that's the interim topic that was out there. That's the issue that we want to try to address. It's just provide that legal remedy for the misuse of prescriptive easements that are contested.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Hicks, for bringing this up. I've had some issues in my district regarding this, situation, and what do people do? How do they work through it other than file a lawsuit? And sometimes they're not in a position to do that. So I do appreciate the concept. I think we can find in other statutes the kind of language that will, in effect, give some discretion to the court, but with some findings that they might make that will result in that payment of that cost that will achieve what you want to achieve. So I feel like we can come, and I would support and make a motion that we get a bill draft on this, so we can look at it and begin to work through on the issue of just the remedies in these cases when either people are have maybe abused the easement and people want to have some legal remedy for that. And it's very clear in statute, because the issue was, I know the situation in my district was that it wasn't clear what the remedy could be. So they're going to have to get a lawyer, file a lawsuit, but the law wasn't really clear about what remedy was available to you in that situation. So I think this clears that up. And then the issue of the use of the legal system in order to obtain a favorable outcome that isn't really necessarily fair. And it's just, again, the sort of lawfare concept. So I think both of those need to be dealt with. And again, I would support and make a motion for Josh to do a bill draft.
Representative Chestick. Oh,
You're seconding the motion.
all right. Probably before we get into too much of that, is there any other public testimony concerning this issue? Nothing online? Okay, so we have a motion to draft a bill, trying to amend what we did on prescriptive easement, and a second. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, thank you. we're about to adjourn. I see other people out there who haven't spoken. I'm hoping I didn't leave somebody out in whatever we've done today. It's been a lot of information. I don't see anybody raising their hands. One of the things that I'll say, our next meeting is going to be in November 4th through the 6th in Casper. And more than likely, just don't see another option other than to have a meeting after that. Because we follow along with our Water Development Commission. And so that'll probably happen as well. Anything else? This meeting is adjourned then.
Whoa.
There is something.
Yeah, so,
Well then, go.
okay, yeah, so, yeah, I think the question is, can we only get away with one legislative day in November? Because we have 4 total, we've used 2. If we can get away with only having one legislative day at that November meeting, then maybe we wouldn't need to request another one. So we'll see how that works. It looks like 2 years ago, there were 2 days worth of select water in November, but I don't know if we could try and jam it into one or not. So maybe Mr. Anderson has.
Mr. Chairman, and I defer to Director Mead as well, but I think that that's a pretty long couple days of meetings just with the water development portion, and then with these bills on top of that, it would likely take 2 days in November, I would think, Mr. Chairman.
All right, and if push came to shove, maybe we'd have that last meeting to approve the 2 bills on the bus planning and construction the first day of the session or something like that, but we'll see what happens there. And so, Mr. Chairman, also, so make sure, I think Representative Larson's going to get his bill going for our consideration potentially at our next meeting. And then if it's okay with the committee for the aging irrigation infrastructure, I'll do what I described there. But wanted to just make sure that there's no other, potential bill drafts or anything else that the committee wants to see at the next meeting or potentially in January or February.
Well, except for what we heard concerning the Colorado River, the bill that they would be proposing, obviously that would be out there, so.
Now we're adjourned.